This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Paul, attendance was taken. All accounted for.
I know. We're back.
Extraordinary.
The band is back together.
I was certain Lisa would call in dead, but she didn't. She's here.
She's here.
The newspapers will be coming up later in the hour.
Good.
And also,
thankfully,
the important way she looks at the market across equities, bonds, currencies, and commodities. It's up, green on the screen. I sort of didn't understand because I was out of sabbatical a week ago. What a week in that we cratered when you were driving the car.
Yeah, exactly. No
and we made it
there.
back. Did you realize the VIX closed under where it was before the... I had no idea.
I mean, we're back down. We got a 20 handle. I mean, where we were, Tom,
20.57.
I mean, a week ago today, we were just, at this exact time, Tom, the 7 o'clock hour, Wall Street time, a little panic in the market back in it. But then the market settled out during the remainder of the week.
Bitcoin up, hit 60,000, 59,000 right now in Bitcoin. I did notice Brent crude $80 a barrel.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make about that, but it's resilient. And
it is.
West Texas Intermediate up 1%.
Yeah, we got gold moving higher yet again here, Tom, approaching that high again, up about $10, $2,483 for gold.
2 weeks ago was nuts. There's no other way to put it. This is less nuts this week, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of economic data. This week, Michael McKee will be very busy. And just to mention this, and I think we'll make it a theme here, Jackson Hole has changed. I mean, it was, to me, sort of a snooze fest. Would Lisa Bramowitz hit a trout over the head with a paddle? And the answer is all of a sudden now the Powell speech matters.
It does. I mean, you and Lisa will be out there, so that'll be a great coverage. McKee hopefully will make it out there if he can, find his plane ticket. So, but no, I think anytime you hear the Fed here when it's about to pivot, Tom, that would be very important.
On the breaks through the day, I'm going to be doing YouTube. Of course, we're out there. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning, Manila, in your evening. Thrilled at the Asian attendance in the evening. I'll be out on breaks today looking for old gringo cowboy boots.
Okay.
I need a new pair.
Yep, sure.
The Tony Lamas are absolutely shot. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our first business flash of the week, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. Yeah, futures right now posting some modest gains. Traders getting ready for more data that's going to shed some light on the health of the economy. Also, the outlook on interest rates. Fed Governor Michelle Bowman said she still sees upside risk for inflation and continued strength in the labor market, and that's a sign she may not be ready to support an interest rate cut in September. Now, as far as data this week, tomorrow it's a report on U.S. producer prices. Wednesday, July's consumer price index. Also this week, we'll get retail sales, industrial production, and housing starts. So let's get to futures. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 38 points. Dow futures, little change, up 32 points. S&P futures up about 0.1%, or 9 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.07%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.96%, and that's up 1 basis point. Not much on earnings today, but this week, Walmart, Home Depot, Deere will open their books. And then we have companies making news. Well, I'll start with Disney. They've unveiled its expansion plans, includes new areas devoted to movie villains, Florida's Magic Kingdom. It's also planning 4 new cruise ships, but stay tuned. We're going to break this all down for you at 7:48 in our newspaper segment. Selfless plug there. Disney shares up 0.3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
She's drunk the Kool-Aid, I can see. As well. We get started. We've got some good perspective on portfolios through the morning. Amanda Agati joins us, Chief Investment Officer, Asset Management, PNC Bank. I've been watching a lot of Pirates baseball, so it's good to have Amanda. Best ballpark in the country, except for a small green thing up in Boston. Amanda, we've recovered here, and I know I have a long-term plan, but for the people that piled into cash on Monday, what do they do as they return to the market?
Well, it's great to be with you both. Thanks so much for having me. I contend that they should not have piled into cash. So I'd be putting that money right back to work here. I mean, we think there's a lot of sort of interesting opportunities in the fixed income market right now. Even with the big swoon that we had in equities last week, the market is still effectively priced to perfection. So it's a little bit tougher to buy equities here.
Okay, well, come on, give me. Everybody went to cash. The charts show it. It's out this weekend. Where do we go in the equity market?
We didn't go to cash.
Well, I know you didn't, but Lisa did. I did. Wait, I was already in cash. Where do we go in the equity market?
Well, I think from our perspective, we definitely think quality is still the place to be. So we're very much focused on more defensive equity allocations, not utilities, even though I do love utilities. That's not the kind of defense we're trying to play here. It's much more of a highly diversified, quality-oriented, dividend growth-oriented type of exposure. Dare I say, we have a little bit of minimum volatility factor exposure. And we think the balance of the year is going to be pretty choppy. So having some ballast in equity portfolios, I think, is going to be very valuable in the second half.
Amanda, for those people who kind of track these things, the NASDAQ down 10% from its highs, kind of getting into that correction territory. Is that an opportunity to buy? There might be some value, or does that just signal, oh, boy, we've got more to go?
I think there's probably a little bit more room to go there in terms of the decline. I mean, we'll take it. We haven't had a correction for quite some time, so we can cross that off the list of to-dos. We broke a lot of records for not having corrections, but I still think the NASDAQ is very nearly priced to perfection, and so it just doesn't give us a lot of headroom for some of the choppiness and maybe noise that we're likely to see in the back half of this year. So I think investors get another maybe better crack at it.
So, last week was such a crazy week, and a lot of folks are saying there's some technical issues there with the yen carry trade. But you kind of put it all aside, and you look at earnings. What have you seen from earnings this period here? How should the market feel about the underlying profitability of this market?
Well, what's been great about Q2 earnings season is we finally exited the earnings recession, excluding the Magnificent Seven that we had been in for the last 6 quarters in a row. So there is fundamental strength there. And actually, we're not finished with earnings season, but we're certainly seeing better results relative to where we started earnings season. So I think that's a strong, if not underappreciated, positive in terms of the backdrop here. Q3 earnings expectations got slashed in half. That seems like a big number, but it's actually very much in line with what kind of historical results would expect. But the numbers for 2024 and 2025 are looking really, really strong.
Well, this is the key point. I mean, it's August. Yesterday was like the first chilly evening.
It was nice. Windows open. Windows open. Nice.
It was like normal evening. It's like the edge of August. Soon the leaves will be changing in Central Park. It drives Pharaoh nuts when I say that. Okay, Amanda, great. I got to get to 2025. I got to be long into 2025, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Expectations for earnings growth in 2025 are near 15%. That's a huge number on a year-over-year basis. And so while things may be choppy between here and, say, the election or the results of the election, we do think it will pave the way for some additional momentum into 2025. So we're absolutely thinking that we can finish the year fairly strong and set the stage for a strong 2025 as well.
Amanda, what am I doing with my bond portfolio here? Am I sitting with my 2-year Treasury at 4.06%, or am I taking some credit risk?
I think it's time to start taking a little bit of credit risk. I think what was really interesting and kind of the volatility spike that we saw over the last week or so is that credit spreads widened quite a bit, but we didn't see bond prices follow suit. And I think that just really speaks volumes about the health of credit markets here at this late stage of the cycle. So I think there is an opportunity to add some credit here. We're still a little bit underweight some of those credit-oriented exposures, but I think this is an opportunity for investors to kind of dip a toe back in that water.
Amanda Agati, thank you so much with PNC Financial, CIO Asset Management, to get us started here. It's like a swirl of thoughts. That's all there is, is to it. I mean, my portfolio, it's almost as bad as the Chicago White Sox. That's a benchmark.
I'm just seeing because, the Yankees they left for Chicago last night after their win. And now Chicago's at 28 in 91. I'm like, I have to check with Ari. Is that like the worst record like ever at this point? I mean, these guys are bad.
Yeah, they're like
that's really grim.
We need an update on that. I agree. That's why they're there for the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, that's makes the Tigers look good.
Makes the Tigers look good.
We've had a worse record, believe it or not.
Yeah, futures up 11 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom Porcelli. President Biden is giving his fullest explanation yet for why he decided to end his re-election campaign. In an interview on CBS Sunday Morning, he described the pressure within his own party to step aside.
Polls we had showed that it was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races.
CBS Sunday Morning can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Ohio Senator and Trump vice presidential pick J.D. Vance sat down to discuss abortion in the country. Vance, who has advocated for pro-life policies in the past, told ABC's This Week while he will support the Trump's stance that the decision should be left up to the states, more needs to be done to make the country more pro-family.
We and the pro-life community, I think, have to figure out how to better make our case to the American people and how to make it easier to have a baby. It's way too expensive. Housing is through the roof. Medical costs are through the roof.
Republican VP nominee J.D. Vance spoke on ABC's This Week, heard Sundays on Bloomberg. The leaders of France, Germany, and Britain have endorsed calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and the return of hostages held by Hamas. In a joint statement today, they endorsed the latest push by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt to broker an agreement to end the 10-month-old Israel-Hamas war. Paris has closed out the Olympic Games. In the final overall medal count, the U.S. led with 126, including 40 gold. Meanwhile, U.S. Olympic officials say they will appeal a court ruling that resulted in American gymnast Jordan Childs being stripped of the bronze medal she won in the Paris Olympics floor exercise. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom Porcelli.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. The Olympics, we've got to go there. I mean, we watched a little bit of the close. It was a long closing ceremony, but it was great.
Well, then you had Tom Cruise coming down.
Did you believe that?
Mission Impossible.
Finally starting to show his age, Lisa.
Oh.
I noticed that. I went right there. Finally.
Cool.
Okay.
Showing his age, young Sweeney.
Yes. I mean, we're contemporaries. I said, okay, there's not much more you can do.
Yeah. No, it's so funny. A friend of mine said the same exact thing. She was
the first time I noticed it.
Tom Cruise is looking a little bit older nowadays.
I mean, like normal. But anyway, the Paris Olympics were outstanding. You went into the Olympics thinking, Summer Olympics, Paris, it has to be great.
Well,
and it was
some
great.
reporting her. I mean, Greifeld, I don't know if she's back yet. She's on the Gulfstream, I think. I looked this morning. She is the Gulfstream. But Katie was there, and we'll get a full report.
Okay.
Dr. Ella Arian was there.
Perfect.
We'll have him forget about the economy and what the Fed's going to do. We'll just talk to Mohammed about. I think he was sitting next to some la-di-da. But there was the real question is, do I keep Peacock? I mean, this is the whole thing.
I don't know.
How many people that took Peacock, Paul?
Yep.
Will call up to the 1-800-NBC and say, that was great. Goodbye.
Exactly.
See ya.
Well, that's the thing about these streaming services. They're so easy to cancel and start up again, as opposed to your cable bill or your telephone bill, which takes like a 3-hour phone call to get disconnected.
Bar's having a tantrum. 10 seconds. Detroit Lions. Preseason.
It was one.
It was a friendly.
Stinking preseason
game.
It was a friendly. I mean, we got much more to go.
That's a way to capture the ratings. Giants, Lions. Michael Barr, great to have you back in the saddle with his leadership worldwide on all the news that we have. Futures up 13, NASDAQ up 0.2% this morning. The VIX under 21, that's important. 20.45, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. A little bit of relief from the volatility that ripped through the markets last week. That's due to concerns the Fed is waiting too long to cut interest rates. So right now, let's get to NASDAQ futures, up 0.2%, 45 points. We have Dow futures up 0.1%, 53 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 12 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.07%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.96%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, oil extending its first weekly gain since early July. We have Brent crude at $80 a barrel, WTI crude $77 a barrel. Then gold rose to the highest in a week. We have spot gold at $2,441 an ounce. Currencies, after a strong surge last week, the yen dropped the most against the dollar among its major peers. Right now we have the yen about 0.5% lower, 147.48 against the dollar. Bitcoin up nearly 2%, 59,441. And Apple fans looking for those big innovations when the iPhones are introduced next month, they could be disappointed. Mark Gurman reporting that the iPhone 16 models will be this stopgap to keep sales stable until a more significant overhaul. You're still going to buy it.
Paul
Okay.
came up this weekend.
My battery lasts like 15 minutes.
Conspiracy. Apple up 0.2%. And then Chinese media reporting Foxconn, which assembles the iPhones for Apple, it's recruited 50,000 workers as it gets ready for next month's iPhone 16 launch. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash, Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thank you. You came up this weekend. I said even Sweeney's getting a new phone.
Sure, absolutely. I can't remember the last time I bought one. They were giving them away the last time I got them.
Needs when Kennel Fee's staying with the iPhone 15. But, the family is like 7 phones.
Yep.
It's ridiculous. I got to talk to a child today about the phone thing because they want to go through T-Mobile or whatever.
No.
Because they're preparing to hit me with the phone.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In X number of weeks.
Okay. All right.
It's a devious ploy.
Charlie Pellet is a big fan of T-Mobile, so that's a pretty good,
I have
support there.
the honor of telling Mr. Legier I was wrong. The magenta T-shirt guy.
Yeah, he was good.
I looked at him and I said, "Who is this clown?"
Yep.
And I will say, what he did off of Deutsche Telekom with T-Mobile.
Phenomenal.
Was
Great marketing.
Phenomenal,
Great marketing.
To say the least. We say good morning with futures up 13 on clipping the coupon. Why don't you bring in the piano player from Charles Schwab?
A doubled Northwestern graduate, undergraduate,
much.
and business school. Enough is enough. It's a great school and everything. But Kathy Jones joins us. She's the chief fixed income strategist for Charles Schwab. So, Kathy, what did you guys at the great Charles Schwab complex think about where you were this time last week and what was happening in the markets? What happened last week with some hindsight now?
Yeah, I think it was sort of the confluence of a lot of things, the perfect storm, if you will, with Japan hiking rates, a surprise, even though it was a tiny rate hike, it was a surprise. And then, of course, the weak employment report got people thinking, well, the Fed's got to move more quickly. We might be in a recession. We had the Somme rule triggered. And so everybody exited their existing trades. And, the good news is that the bond market did pretty well. The Treasury market did quite well, and it is back to performing that role of safety and liquidity that people look for.
So we start this new week. It feels a little bit more calm than where we were last week. What is the fixed income call here? Because I think my Fed's going to do something next month. What's the fixed income positioning here going into this Fed decision next month?
Yeah, it's tough because, we had a 380 target on the 10-year, and we got there.
Yep.
And now we're sitting a little bit above there. So there's not an obvious play in treasuries to extend duration, although we have advocated having some duration in portfolios. We still like investment grade corporate bonds because you get that spread, and the spread widened a little bit. So you can still lock in close to 5%, 4.5%, 5% for a 5 to 7 year kind of intermediate term duration. We think, there might be some more spread widening in the future if the economy does slip into recession, but we don't look for a big blowout there. We'd be more cautious on high yield.
I'm fascinated by what CFOs do here. Like Meta was, looking at billions, but do we just, into the end of the year, we got to get it done by November. That's the way the ballet works. Should we be prepared for just massive issuance?
I think there will be a pickup in issuance. Everything sort of came to a halt in terms of issuance during all the volatility, and I think Now with yields down, sure, CFOs are going to take advantage of that and start issuing some more to lock in these yields. But I think the market can absorb it. There's been tremendous demand.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, what's the difference between CFOs lathering up to issue billions of paper and somebody seeing a 30-year mortgage go under X%?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's any difference in behavior.
Yeah, I don't know. So, I mean, Kathy, what do you make of the Japanese yen here? That's such a crazy week, and I think a lot of folks are just trying to figure out, where's fair value for this thing? Where's the Bank of Japan and all those things?
Yeah, it's a really tough call because the forces that led to that volatility are still in place, right? You still have a soft U.S. economy, expectations for rate cuts from the Fed, and you have the Bank of Japan wanting to stabilize their currency and push yields up. So I'm not sure we're done yet.
Okay.
I think we're going to see a lot of volatility there, and in both the yen and in the U.S. markets, because some of this, you guys have a great chart on the carry trade, the G10 carry trade, and if you look at that, you can see we've unwound a lot of it, but we haven't unwound all of it, and I think we're going to deal with this for quite some time.
I look, Kathy, at the bond market, and there's the allure of equities. And I know you're going to say with you and Liz Ann Saunders, you need a balanced portfolio. But is the new 60-40, 60% Kathy Jones, 40% Liz Ann Saunders? I mean, nobody ever talks about this, but there's a point where you flip 60-40 on its head.
Yeah, I think if you're older in retirement, looking and conservative and looking to conserve capital, capital preservation is sort of your top goal and income, then you could go 60-40 the other way. Most people don't, but it's certainly up to the individual and your individual circumstances.
What were the Schwab account holders doing a week ago today? Were they buying, selling? Were they freaking out? Did you get any color from some of your distribution folks?
Yeah, it was really, of course, there was the active traders were active, right?
Yeah,
they wanted to be in the market, and certainly anybody who had sold volatility was trying to exit those. Other than that, I think most people were kind of sitting and watching it, and it happened so fast and was so powerful. I think a lot of people are just on the sidelines going, oh, what's going on here?
I mean, if you take away the morning of last Monday, the rest of the week was pretty stable. I mean, the market even stabilized midday Monday last week, and then the rest of the week was pretty stable. It's just that first indication. So it creates the question, is that recession risk, is it materially higher given what we kind of saw from the jobs report?
Yeah, I think it is. Obviously, if Claudia Sahm says the Sahm roll trigger isn't an indication we're in a recession.
We're trying to get through. Good morning, Claudia. Jones didn't get the memo. We're trying to get through the day without mentioning Claudia Sahm. Well, we just went down in flames.
Sorry, I think she's fantastic, so I had to bring her up. But we've triggered that, and then we had a tiny disinversion of the yield curve. So it's kind of like, is that two strikes? And now we're looking at even the Taylor rule saying the Fed is too tight. I think that if they wait too long, we are going to see recession. And so I think that they are really on the edge, teetering on the edge of waiting too long, and they need to get moving here.
Kathy Jones, thank you so much. With Charles Schwab, they're really interesting. And, this is what we do, folks. Amanda Agati, Kathy Jones, to get us started on a Monday. Lots of thoughtful discussion this week. And Paul, wrapped around economics, CPI retail sales back to back.
Yeah, we get some eco data this week. We get a sense of kind of this inflation side of the equation. We kind of the dual mandate and all for the Federal Reserve in terms of full employment and price stability. We'll see some inflation data here, and it feels like inflation obviously has been coming down, Tom, from that peak level, but this last 100 basis points or so to get to that Fed 2-ish% inflation level is going to be a little bit harder.
Green on the screen here. It's up 0.3% on the NASDAQ, 16 points. SPX futures are higher. In the yen, it's important. 147.58 on yen. Weaker yen. I haven't done the technical work yet to tell you where the critical level is on that. 161 on euro yen. That gets my attention as well. From New York City, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr, Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures advancing with a big week of data on tap. We have the July Producer Price Index out Tuesday. The U.S. Consumer Price Index for July is out Wednesday. In June, CPI posted the first drop in 2 years after showing no change in May. Bloomberg Economics anticipates another soft reading. Thursday, what's on to July retail sales. We also get the weekly reports on initial jobless claims and industrial production. And then Friday, housing starts, consumer sentiment. So right now we have NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 54 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 63 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 14 points. We have the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.07%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.96%, and that's up 1 basis point. Shares of Hawaiian Electric down 10%. It issued a going concern warning. It also pegged losses from liabilities from the wildfires at $1.7 billion. Then you have Starbucks up 2%. A report from the Wall Street Journal that activist investor Starboard Value has taken a stake in the company. And then finally, Front Office Sports says Venue Sports, that's that streaming platform developed by Walt Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers Discovery. They say it's going to reportedly launch by the end of August. That's just before the start of the NFL regular season. There you go. That is your Bloomberg Business
20
Flash.
seconds here. Come on, you got to be kidding me. You're paying that amount of money for part of what I literally want every Sunday at 1 p.m.?
Exactly. There's no, NBC. I don't think there's any CBS, but there's a lot of, I don't know. It's just, they're slicing and dicing, trying to figure it out. Check back in 2 or 3 years. I think they'll have figured it out.
I literally told Vet Bill, there's no dinner unless you cancel Peacock.
Yeah.
I mean, Olympics over. Let's go.
Done.
Move.
Yep.
Even if they do have Tottenham, the dreaded Tottenham Spurs. Joining us now, this is perfectly timed. Henrietta Treyz, Veda Partners. She is outstanding. She's really helped us out, particularly on our weekend coverage of politics with David Gura. Henrietta, I'm going to describe the chart because I assume you haven't seen it. Joe Weisenthal, he's okay.
He's pretty good.
Puts out a lagging battleground real GDP per capita for the states that are involved in the election. Henrietta, Arizona is a massive boom economy. Wisconsin is negative real GDP growth. Pennsylvania is barely positive. The swing states all are not one, are they?
They are not all one. I just saw that chart actually and was hoping to dig into it. I want to see how much of that Arizona data is based on immigration, but it's fascinating. And it kind of reflects what we've seen from voters all year, which is that they have this feeling that the U.S. economy is a disaster and there's going to be a recession. I've had conversations with, mothers, friends, mothers about how we're going to start a recession on Monday today. And there's just this misinformation out there about how imminent and disastrous the U.S. economy is in some media outlets.
Yeah.
And then get these specific numbers and personal understanding of finances, and people feel really good about their own personal finances and even their state. So it'd be really interesting to dig into that Arizona data.
Paul, average swing state, 4.2% positive from the pandemic. Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada, Michigan on top.
Yep, absolutely. Henrietta, how was the Democratic ticket looking these days? Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, how was their weekend? How are they set up for the next several weeks?
Man, it's really kind of nothing but the hits for them. Shocking fundraising numbers. Act Blue, the Democratic fundraising arm, is up $500 million since Kamala Harris got into the race, which is incomparable to anything else I've ever seen. You've got her up 5 points from when she started in Pennsylvania, up 2 in Michigan, up 4 in Wisconsin. And the most jarring thing that I don't know that I've seen it before. I'm going to have to go through the data when I get a minute, but Democrats leading, Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump in terms of who is best suited to steer the U.S. economy. That should be really eye-opening for the Republican Party at the top and the bottom of the ticket.
So what is going to be the response, do you believe, from former President Donald Trump and his campaign in the weeks ahead?
Well, what we've seen is a very disorganized response from Trump. The campaign and folks down ballot saying, talk about immigration, talk about the U.S. economy, and former President Trump just incapable of getting there. So we are focused on crowd sizes, AI, conspiracy theories. Every single tweet has something that's a little bit more incongruous than the last one.
Right.
So they really need to wrap it up.
I get all this navel gazing, Henrietta, but does it matter in terms of what people do when they go in the voting booth? How much money so-and-so raised? How many people showed up in an airplane hangar, yes or no? Does it really correlate into what we do when we walk in the booth or fill out the mail-in?
Well, advertising dollars have a substantial impact, and momentum begets momentum. So you really want to be on the side of the winning team pretty soon here for the Trump team, because people like to vote for a winner. We talked in the beginning about how not all swing states are the same, but they do tend to move as a basket together. Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania are in the similar sort of media bracket, Georgia and North Carolina, and then Arizona and Nevada. So however they're trending starts to beget its own motion. What I would focus on for Republicans is the mail-in balloting. That is stuff at the margin in a state like Pennsylvania, for example, that can really move the needle. You want to bank voters as early as possible. 72% of the mail-in ballot requests are coming from Democrats. Republicans have a real hard time convincing voters that mail-in balloting is not fraud. So those little things all are going to add up in a very tight election, which is what I expect from this one.
Henrietta, what's the latest on the debate schedules these days?
My understanding is that there's still only that one September 10th debate set. I don't know that there's going to be more. It seems like the two sides are very far apart on agreeing to where it would be hosted or what the terms might be. So I'm expecting just one presidential and probably just one vice presidential as well.
So where do we stand here on it? Just the money that we're seeing Kamala Harris raise here is just extraordinary. Where do you expect it to be deployed? How will it be deployed going forward?
You know, there's all these ad buys that don't take effect until after the DNC. So one of the things to think about is, as we look at the polling now, as I walk through, you know, she's up 4 in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The DNC hasn't even happened yet. That's free advertising. That's free campaign spend. Once we get into September, it's going to shift, and that's where we see the money, $200 billion million from Future Forward and other PACs. That's when we'll start to see that really roll out.
Within the Biden-Pelosi conversation this weekend, thank you to CBS for that, and look for Face the Nation on Bloomberg Radio at 10 a.m. Sunday morning on Bloomberg Radio. Margaret Brennan, Robert Costa, and the rest. And I look, Henrietta, at the debate over the weekend about all that's going on, whatever your politics are. Will it actually shift the majority in the House or Senate? What say you?
You know, the Senate is really, really promising for the Republican Party. The statistical and geographical states that are up, you know, John Tester in Montana, for instance, now being behind by about 3 points in a state that Trump looks like he's going to win by 25 points. I think we talked about that last week. That's going to be a really tough race for Democrats to hold on to. So Republicans, in my opinion, have a 90% chance of taking the Senate next year. On the House side, it also favors Republicans, but only slightly. There are 10 true toss-up seats, and I think Democrats are going to deploy Tim Walz to try to speak to those states and get those House races lined up.
Great Monday brief. Thank you so much. Henrietta Treyz with Veda Partners. John Ehrlichman holding court up in Canada.
Yeah,
he was on the short listed to be the new Maple Leafs coach. John Ehrlichman, always with a wonderful Twitter feed.
Yep.
On this day in 1981, so that's 43 years ago, young Sweeney.
Yep.
The first personal computer from IBM was unveiled. And I remember it, and I remember it was ugly as all get out. They wanted to sell 240,000. They sold 3 million. And at the same time, Apple launched the elegant Apple III. This is before the colorful one. And only the rich kids had that. In today's dollars, the Apple III was center tendency $21,000 to buy it today.
Exactly.
That's why the rich kids only had it back
then. Now we've got, I'm sure, way more computing power just sitting here on iPhones. So, you know.
But that, John Ehrlichman, thank you for that. What do you call it? Subscribe? No. Follow John Ehrlichman. Jon Ehrlichman, E-R, Ehrlichman, John Ehrlichman out on Twitter. Futures advance up 12. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Biden says he dropped his re-election bid because congressional Democrats told him he was hurting their chances in November. The president gave his fullest explanation yet for his decision in an interview on CBS. Bloomberg's Bill Ferries.
Well, he went on in that interview to say that, the polls showed it was going to be neck and neck, right down to the wire at the end. I think, people looking back at that would say, the polls, the momentum seemed to certainly be with Donald Trump. And we know now that a lot of the money, a lot of the donations that are so key to running the campaign had really dropped off. And you've seen that rebound really quickly with Kamala Harris's.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferries. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump will sit down for an interview with Elon Musk on X this evening. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has indirectly acknowledged ongoing military actions in Russia's Kursk border region to push the war out into the aggressor's territory. Zelensky made the comment late Saturday in his nightly address. It came days after Ukraine began a surprise military incursion into the Kursk region. The leaders of France, Germany, and Britain have endorsed calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and the return of scores of hostages held by Hamas. In a joint statement today, they endorsed the latest push by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt to broker an agreement to end the 10-month-old Israel-Hamas war. Meanwhile, the U.S. shored up naval and air forces in the Middle East to help Israel fend off any major attack from Iran ahead of a resumption of Gaza ceasefire talks planned for later this week. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin ordered the urgent deployment of the USS Abraham Lincoln, a carrier group equipped with fighter jets and a guided missile submarine to the region. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With the Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
This is an important lesson here, and you got to go back. And thank God there was Dimitri Young, because he was the only player on the team. They said he single-handedly won 6 games for the worst team in the history of baseball, which is Alan Trammell's 2003 Detroit Tigers. But the story here, Michael, is that was the foundation, the bottom. They went out, on, among others, they got Urbina, Rondell White, Ivan Rodriguez. And the answer is even the White Sox in this malaise can look out 4 or 5 years of a rebuild. And that's what sport's about. The Tigers, years on from that, were really quite good.
They were, and I remember that era extremely well. And, it was like, oh, my goodness, we're going to have the worst record ever in the history of baseball. Thank goodness we avoided that. But we were thinking as Tigers fans, well, heck, there's nowhere else to go but up. And that's the same way for the Chicago White Sox. They're having a whale of a time.
There's been issues there for years.
Yeah.
But I look at the Baltimore Orioles. They've won 70 games already. With the Yankees, and they were in a mat 4 or 5 years ago.
It's all about new ownership, Tom, there at Baltimore. That's obviously,
it's about new
obviously
ownership.
been the key thing.
It's a big key turnaround.
Exactly.
You know what's great about the new ownership of the Orioles? They sit down right by the dugout. They're incognito.
Okay.
But they're not up in some box sipping a beverage of my choice.
They also sit down right by the news department also.
They do sit down by the news.
The working folk. Yep.
As well, we say good morning to the ownership of the Baltimore Orioles and the Detroit Tigers. Do we get pizza out of that?
Yeah, exactly.
I hope we do. Futures up 11. Dow futures up 57. NASDAQ up 0.2%. A nice pulse of green on the screen this morning. And the VIX I'm watching critically, 20.56. Let's go round trip. 12.13 out to 19-ish. Ugly Monday out to what?
60, 62, something. Yep.
62. Anything over 30 is called a Lehman statistic. Crater down to 30 and then grind it in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday down to 23.
Yep.
And we closed Friday elegantly at the 21 level I've been looking at.
Yep.
And now we're 20.58. That's amazing. I don't care. I was in triple leveraged all cash. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen to kick off a new trading week. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 32 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 45 points. S&P futures up 0.2% or 10 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.06%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.95%, and that's up 1 basis point. Commodities, spot gold higher, $2,440 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $80 a barrel. WTI crude, $77 a barrel. Companies making news. Tesla reportedly stopped orders for its cheaper $61,000 Cybertruck. The New York Post says its website now only lists the nearly $100,000 model as the least expensive option available for order. We have Tesla shares down about 0.3%. And fitness company Lifetime taking pickleball to a new level. Yes, the ultimate pickleball. It's going to debut at its clubs next week. It features new patent-pending balls that have improved bounce and speed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
That's 30 seconds on this. Do you do pickleball?
No. But it's taken over the world of tennis. Tennis courts and the tennis, purebred tennis people are just really upset about it.
Well, it's even in the towns. You notice they're
taking
changing.
Wait, let's stop the show.
Yes.
Are you pickleballing, Lisa?
No,
you're doing everything
I
else?
haven't done the pickleball. I just think it's it's not too easy.
No, wait, are your kids doing it and there's travel teams?
No, please don't go there, please.
Enough travel.
We will see.
Enough.
We'll talk about the Olympics here. There's lots. It was an amazing success for NBC. Congratulations on that. On to Los Angeles 2028.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages, the Lisa Mateo Hour. It's brought to you by IBKR with Interactive Brokers Forecast Trader. You can trade your views on key economic and climate indicators. Visit ibkr.com/forecast and get started today. An incredibly busy weekend. Lisa, I saw her slaving away. She had like an hour's worth of stuff. Go.
Thank you. Artificial intelligence, everybody's talking about it, right? So it wants to count your calories. So let me explain, okay? Researchers developing this technology, it's going to analyze what you eat bite by bite. So basically what you do, this is from the Wall Street Journal, you record yourself eating whatever, as I'm eating, a spoonful of chobani. It's recording the portion sizes of the spoon as it goes into my mouth. But the only thing that it's, I know, don't huff and puff just yet, okay? But what it's not recording, it's not up to date with is what kind of food you're eating. So that they say is going to, come in the next few months or so. But
is this like an AI thing?
It's an AI thing. So it tracks the spoon, how much is in the spoon as you.
But you've already got one of those crazy watches on your wrist. Doesn't that count everything now?
No, it doesn't count calories.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't.
Right.
There's a lot of apps and stuff, but...
How's AI going to solve this? I'm sitting there with a Manhattan up. We're out of cherry, so I'm just sitting there on the deck with a Manhattan up watching the sunset over Sweeney's house.
Okay.
I could see him in the distance on his Vespa. Vet Bill's on my lap, and Kennel Fee is right next to Vet Bill, and I got a box of Whole Foods crackers, which they love.
Yes.
I have one. Then Vet Bill has one. Then Kennel Fee has one. AI's going to keep track of that?
It'll keep track of yours if it's on a spoon. That's the only thing. They're working on the technology, okay?
Yeah, so are we. Next.
It could go somewhere. Okay. Disney, they held the D23 convention over in California over the weekend. So they revealed all those details. Remember, they said they were going to spend so much money on their parks. So they broke it down for you. So stay with me, moms and dads, take notes, okay? So Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom in Florida, they're going to get a new land devoted to villains. Frontierland is getting an upgrade that includes a Cars-themed area. Nice. Then you have the Hollywood Studios in Florida. They're getting land based on Pixar's Monsters franchise. Then over in Animal Kingdom, they have a new Indiana Jones ride, and they're recreating the house from that film Encanto. And then globally, you have Spider-Man attractions coming to Disney parks in Shanghai, Hong Kong, Paris. The company's building a log flume ride based on The Lion King. And here's the topper. They're planning 4 new cruise ships.
Now we're talking.
So it's not just, the parks, but the cruise ships,
Each one of those babies costs $1 billion.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
They're awesome, though. I'm not a cruise person, but I went out on a investor cruise they had for us a bunch of years ago. Pretty nice.
We go to surveillance. Oh, he's not there. He's on his break. He's got a union break. It's a union job.
Yeah.
Cy Benson is our cruise guy. And Cy, I wanted to ask him which is the geography, like which cruise does he like best, but He's on his. It's a union break.
It's a union break.
Lots of money.
But those Disney cruises, I did take a tour. You're right, and it's amazing the ships and how much stuff they have on it. But they broke it down. They said how much, and this is even. They've been talking about how the parks business is starting to slow. So
it's just a little cyclical thing.
A little cyclical thing. Okay, corporations. That whole in and out flying on one day, it's starting to change. Like a lot of corporations are cutting back on that. So this is the head of Global Business Travel Association tells the Financial Times the way companies traveling are different. So they're declining on those one-day flight trips, frustration with flights because they're just getting tired of being delayed and just for in and out in one day. Environmental concerns, so they're packing more meetings into fewer trips. So companies.
My longest one-day
change.
trip that I did on a fairly regular basis was Denver. New York to Denver. I would do that on a one day. Yeah, you could get in there, get 2 or 3 meetings, and get back at not a crazy time. That's the max. Only for Janice would I do that.
Yeah,
big
do you
out there.
is Zoom a replacement? Is the heart of the matter?
Good question.
I don't think it is.
No, that's
I'm in
true.
the camp. It's on. Jamie Dimon's heated about this.
Yeah,
he's at J.P. Morgan. I believe he's get on the plane.
Yeah, get on the plane.
There's
go
no
see your
mincing
clients.
words. Go see your clients. Have lunch. Talk about which I'm fully on board with that. And you know where I am, Lisa, on Zoom.
Yes. Yes, I do.
You got one more for us?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure if you have one of these, Tom. Do you have a pet trust or a pet directive?
I actually worked on this weekend.
You did?
Yes. I got 150 pages from Keith, When Are You Going to Die? Great law firm. And Keith, when are you going to die?
.com.
And back, there's 6 pages in the way back on the dog trust. Wow. And it's there.
So you
I
did
got it
money towards
notarized.
their care?
Yeah, so it's not, so the pet trusts were like, when people would leave millions of dollars to their, to Fido.
Right.
But now it's the directives, which is basically saying who's going to care for your pet, and then they'll leave money for that care.
Okay.
We call it a side letter.
A side letter.
I said to Keith, I said, do you understand what dog walking costs in Manhattan? And he had never seen those numbers. And,
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Well, that's what they're saying, because you're spending money on that. The food is ridiculous.
No
the
way.
health care,
Right.
the dentist, isn't that another one for the teeth?
Yeah, the dentist isn't. We're just featuring the dentist on our new Instagram account. But, the Horace Mann School of Veterinary Medicine. I just make the checkout tuition payments to Horace Mann. But, Paul, this is serious stuff. And the answer is I have to write into the trust Chewy.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
right into the trust.
Absolutely.
He demanded
Direct payment.
Where do we
Direct
get the
payment.
food? So this is like a new thing.
So
like
it's becoming more prevalent for people who are not rich, just everyday people who just have pets, and they want to make sure they take care of who's taking care of their pets.
Lisa Mateo, our newspapers this morning. Thank you, Interactive Brokers, for that. Futures up 14, Dow futures up 68. Can we just sit there and you knew what he was going to do? How did Cruz rehearse this job? What do you do? How do you rehearse that?
Well, doesn't he do a lot of his own stunts?
I think he does, yeah.
He's famous for it.
Yes.
And what was amazing when he's pulling the cord, I'm like, what the hell is he doing? And he landed perfectly.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a 10.
Yeah, he's good.
Gold medal.
He knows what he's doing.
He's got to promote the Olympics coming to Los Angeles.
Right.
That's what he's got to promote.
He
did it.
Major cred. I mean,
He's one of those guys. He's still a movie star. He's not. He's still like from the old school movie star. He can carry. A movie.
I believe he has equity in Mission Impossible. Like he has. While he's involved.
Yeah.
He's got legit equity in it. Do you think anybody under 5 years older than Lisa has any idea where Mission Impossible came from?
No.
Do they have any idea how our world stopped as kids? Like it stopped. And I think it was Friday night or Thursday night, and you get the popcorn out, and you promise your father you'd mow the lawn tomorrow morning. And there was Mission Impossible, and that's all there was to it. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Cruz. LA 2028.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, everybody back in the saddle. Last time, I should say, till the third week of December that we're all together. But here we are. We're going to make this real quick because Damian Sassower's darkened the door. So much to talk about off the yen carry debacle 7, 8, 9 days ago as well. Paul, green on the screen this morning.
Yeah, not a bad way. A little bit much different than we were a week ago, literally today, this morning, Tom. So we got a little bit of a green on screen here. We got a couple more earnings trickling in over the next several days as well. Then we think about the Fed next month.
Dollar yen 147.57, up a stick. And that's interesting. I don't know where the technical point is. We'll watch that. We'll hear from Mr. Sassower in a moment. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we've got futures posting modest gains. Traders getting ready for more data. It's going to shed some light on the health of the economy. Also, the outlook for interest rates. We had Fed Governor Michelle Bowman said that she still sees upside risk for inflation, continued strength in the labor market, and that could be a sign she may not be ready to support an interest rate cut in September. As far as data, tomorrow, report on U.S. producer prices. Wednesday, July's consumer price index. Also this week, we have retail sales, industrial production, and housing starts. So we have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 44 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 75 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 13 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.05%, little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.95%, and that's up 1 basis point. Not much for earnings today, but this week we'll hear from Walmart, Home Depot, and Deere. Starbucks shares up 2%. Report from the Wall Street Journal. Activist investor Starboard Values taking a stake in the company. And then we'll stick with coffee. Arabica prices jumped in New York the most in 5 weeks. The reason why? A mild frost, parts of Brazil, adding to those supply concerns. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. I never got that coffee straight.
What?
There's two brands, two types.
Yeah, I don't know.
One's fancy, one's not.
Yep.
I guess Vietnam's a huge coffee producer now.
Yep. Right across the globe on that.
I got one question for Sassower. I guess is it the weather was so good this weekend?
Yeah.
Does the ball travel farther in the cold weather?
It was actually not traveling well at all because it was the humidity, actually. It was a little breezier, and the wind works against you when you want to get your ball going in the right direction. But
you're shanking like you are in the fifth hole.
I was great off the tee this weekend. It's my putter, man. I mean, I got to tell you, my Scotty Cameron has left me, and it's a big problem, and I'm going to have to take some drastic steps if I want to save the season.
Where's your tip point on yen weakness where you say all clear? Is it a 148? Is it a 152? What's in your head there?
So, that's a great question, and I think you can't look to the yen for a level. You got to look to the yuan for where this can really pick up steam. And so for me, it's another funding currency. It's one that really got hit with the Trump trade here in the last month and a half. And so there may be a little bit more there. And so, the yuan's rallied some, I think it's, from 713 last I looked, maybe 720 again. I don't know. But basically the gist of the matter is the yuan's been a funding currency du jour, just like the yen. And now only 8 currencies year to date, Tom, out of 33 are actually up versus the yen year to date. And it used to be pretty much all of them. So, we've had a pretty big reversal, and it has yet to extend to China. And we have some China data coming this weekend as well.
So what do we do with the yen here? Is it a stronger currency?
Sell it. No,
is it a stronger currency? Is it?
I think rate differentials are still wide, Paul, and I think that this dollar, kind of rotation out of the dollar is still overblown. I think the dollar still has a lot of wind at its back. This is a correction. If you just look based on rate differentials alone, the yen was significantly undervalued, probably still is based on a lot of people's models. But look, it's interesting. The BOJ is kind of pumping the brakes here, and the U.S. seems to be, despite what we would have, we have some inflation data coming this week, and we'll see what happens there. But growth is coming off, but it's not coming off as quickly as people would otherwise for intermeeting cuts and 50 basis points in the next 2 meetings. Even though that's Jay Barry and my boy J.P. Morgan's call, it's not something I think the market's prepared for.
So we sit here, and I've got my Federal Reserve next month. What is your market discounting here? What do you think the Fed's going to do?
I think, Tom, did you say that Jackson Hole takes on a little bit greater importance earlier this morning? I think that's right.
So.
I think so, too.
To me, it was a snooze fest. All I was worried about was Bramo going to kill a trout with a canoe paddle. And all of a sudden, it matters.
Well, look, I think it's broadly speaking, inflation's still a story. We are kind of transitioning from that inflation narrative to one of growth. But it's not just a U.S.-centric story anymore. We've got inflation data coming out of India, the UK and France all this week. It's all going to give us insight as to whether, we are seeing disinflation sort of take hold globally. And we've got rate decisions. We have New Zealand, Philippines, Norway, and we have China. And China's it's pretty key here. We have, activity data coming out of China on Thursday. We've got a rate decision. I think another 10 bips is still penciled in between now and the end of the year. So they're cutting, but, my God, the bond buying in China, CGBs have just been ripping to the upside. And now with the yuan at its back, it's making some money for fixed income investors out there. Bonds are back.
This is what surveillance is about. We're going to dovetail in the expertise of Damian Sassower with all that he does at Bloomberg Intelligence. And I'm going to go over to Foreign Affairs Magazine. I put this out. It's not published yet. It's not in the magazine that Damian reads in the ninth poll. China's real economic crisis. You're going to hear me talk about this. Brad Setzer brought it to my attention. Zongyuan Zoi Liu, I'm going to butcher that pronunciation, but she replaced Elizabeth Economy. It's CFR. Okay. It's a tour de force, and she says exactly what you say. Management of their currency is front and center. Do they have the power to take on the market?
So, yeah, they absolutely do. This is something that a lot of people forget. And I'm a central bank watcher. I'm a card counter. I like to say that all the time. And, if you think about, the dual mandate of the Fed or any central bank for that matter, it's inflation and it's growth, right? But in order to manage price pressures and inflation, it means you have to manage your currency. It's all that matters. So I'm not calling central banks inflation currency targeters. Oh, yeah, I am. I guess I am. Yeah, they are targeting currency levels. But more importantly, Tom, they are targeting currency volatility. And I think that is the key point. In order for people to continue to do business internationally, abroad, cross-border, you need to have some modicum of currency stability, and we haven't reached that point yet. And so I think you're going to see, these volatile moves until we otherwise
If they go 7.20 yuan to 6.99 yuan, that makes it harder for them to export. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely, right? The value, well, yes. But here's the thing. Is it really going to punch the needle so much? Think about, the level of trade that's come off between China and the rest of the world. It's really China and the Southeast Asian bloc. And look at those currency differentials to get a real sense. Because people are, look, China is basically, logistics and all that. They're dumping into Southeast Asia and then exporting along. So, you see a lot of that going on. And those differentials have not really moved to the extent we've seen in other markets.
How does he get this voltage up on Monday morning?
No idea.
I haven't even had the third cup of Sankey yet.
Come on.
Lisa's over there chowing down the Chobani. Which Chobani?
Lisa and I went for a 4-mile run earlier.
Plain, Tom. Only plain.
Only plain. Nothing on it.
Nothing.
And Sassower is like he's on the third beverage.
I put the Captain Crunch in my Chobani, then we're talking.
Paul, are you ready for the FedEx Cup this weekend? It starts the playoffs.
That's what I heard.
Playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I saw them
Scheffler. Did you see Scheffler crying on the podium? It was so beautiful.
It was good. It was good. We'll get geared up for that. Value. Where do I go for value? I just want a trade. Can you give me one trade without interest rate differentials and convexity? What am I buying?
Oh, Jesus. I hate giving out trade recommendations because I'm not allowed to do that. You hired me at Bloomberg Intelligence. But I think
what are your clients
I think let's look at relationships here, right? And Brent crude back above $80. You know that there's a strongly positive correlation between Indian government bond yields and the oil price. And look, I think that's something that, is basically going to maintain and something that's going to continue. Another correlation that I like to look at is Taiwan dollar gold. Because as you see funding...
dollar gold.
That's correct. So the Taiwan dollar has really been the funding currency outside of the yen, and for that matter, the yuan, that a lot of people have tracked. But it's also kind of influenced by Taiwan Semiconductor and, movement into and out of growth stocks. And so you've seen it kind of get caught up in the noise. Right. And I think it's going to resume its strength, its kind of correlation to gold and being a risk-off, sort of safe haven value, safe haven asset. And so I think that's broken down and that can rebuild. So
it's a perfect day it's a tailor-made
beautiful day to be alive.
Get out there and start the first 9 of the week, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Monday, you play away.
Look, we had 2 home runs from Soto. Judge, Giancarlo. It was just a bloodbath there. And then the Mets, man. The Mets are falling back here. They're half a game out of the wild card now.
Did you see Sale is pitching against Snell tonight, folks?
Really?
I
did not.
San Francisco Giants. I was going to take the Gulfstream, except Greifeld has it.
What time does that game start, though? It's out west. Yeah, it's late.
Yeah, I got to take a longer surveillance nap. But Sale versus Snell is like the August pitching matchup.
You know,
that'll be good.
I'm into it. I like Major League Baseball.
It's
as long as the
great
Yankees are tied for first in the major
You're
leagues.
from office on a Monday. That's great. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Yeah, tied for first in the major league. Yeah, anyway, President Biden says he dropped his reelection bid because congressional Democrats told him he was hurting their chances in November. The president gave his fullest explanation yet for his decision in an interview on CBS Sunday morning.
I thought it was important because although it's a great honor being president, I think I have an obligation to the country to do the most important thing we can do, and that is we must defeat Trump.
CBS Sunday Morning can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Former President Trump plans to sit down for an interview tonight on X with its owner, Elon Musk. The billionaire is promising an unscripted conversation with no limits on subject matter. Bloomberg's Bill Ferries.
If you go to Elon's tweet about this whole thing happening, a lot of his kind of the hardcore supporters are asking questions about, they want to see questions asked about a lot of conspiracy theories. So I don't know where this is going to go, but certainly it's going to be an interesting moment.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferries. Musk often butted heads with Trump when he was in the White House, but he endorsed the former president last month. The 2024 Summer Olympics have come to a close in Paris, and the countdown begins for the Games in Los Angeles. Athletes like U.S. soccer stars Sophia Smith say 2028 is not that far off.
Some of our games here felt like home games, and that's people traveling, fans here. Playing at home is going to just be like insane.
Tom Cruise made a Hollywood-style entrance at the closing ceremony, rappelling down into the stadium and riding off with the Olympic flag on a motorcycle. In the final overall medal count, the U.S. led with 126, including 40 gold. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, over the weekend, Lucas Shaw publishing last night a blistering summary of the carnage of entertainment. Everybody, NBC, great victory lap and all that. The profit of streaming is whatever billion, and more than 100% of it is Netflix. Everybody else combined is losing money.
Yep.
Obviously, they're raising our rates. Isn't that going to increase the churn?
It could, but we'll see. Netflix has raised its rates over the last 5, 6, 7 years and has not negatively impacted churn. And that goes to the quality of the programming that Netflix has. So the question is for everybody else, is your programming good enough to prevent churn? So we'll have to see here. But again, it's a tough business, but it's a business it can be very profitable. We see that from Netflix. You just have to have that certain scale, which is why you're seeing that sports package come together.
Yeah, Lucas's summary is the scale's a problem for Warner Brothers Discovery. And that's a huge mystery into 2025. If you do bad will write-downs once, doesn't that always indicate it happens again? You don't do one.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, a lot of these goodwill write-downs are like roughly half of the market capitalization of some of these companies of Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery. So a significant value there in terms of the billions of dollars. And this is money they had just spent over the last 2 or 3 years. And
we'll get the usual victims on, led by Geetha Raghunathan on this. It's just absolutely fascinating. And certainly after the execution that NBC did on the closing ceremonies of the Olympics was just extraordinary. The VIX 20.48. Excuse me, a lift to the market. Futures up 14, NASDAQ up 0.3%. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. A little bit of relief from the volatility that ripped through the markets last week over concerns the Fed is waiting too long to cut interest rates. Now we have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 51 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 62 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 13 points. The 2-year yield at 4.05%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.94%, and that is little changed. To commodities, oil extending its first weekly gain since early July. It comes as OPEC trimmed forecast for global oil demand this year and next. We have Brent crude $80 a barrel, WTI crude $77 a barrel. Gold rose to the highest in a week. We have spot gold up $2,443 an ounce. Currencies, after a surge last week, the yen dropped the most against the dollar among its major peers, right now down about 0.6% at 147.62 against the dollar. Bitcoin up 2% at 59,730. And Apple fans looking for innovations when the new iPhones are introduced next month, well, they could be a little disappointed. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman saying that the iPhone 16 models, they're going to be a stopgap to keep sales stable until a more significant overhaul next year. Apple up about 0.2%. And JetBlue Airways has kicked off a $2.75 billion bond and loan sale that's backed by its loyalty program. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
That's precisely what I was talking about, Paul. I look at this just like a home mortgage. Behavior is going to change, and it's not going to be negative interest rates and the foolishness of 2020. I don't know where it's going to be. I don't know what it means, but this Meta deal, which we barely covered last week, I think it was $10 billion off. I may be wrong on that, but I'm sorry. And say that again, Lisa. Did you burn the script up? I know you burned them in ceremony.
No.
What
for the JetBlue?
Yeah.
They kicked off the $2.75 billion bond and loan sale. So that's what they're going through right now. They broke it down. They said $1.5 billion 7-year bonds, callable in 3 years, $1.25 billion for a 5-year loan term. So that's how they kind of broke it down.
The market is wide open on the fixed income.
I just think it's going to be a frenzy. Also wide open is the rebound in oil. Complex, $80.36 Brent crude. West Texas up a stick this morning as well. Ellen Wald is definitive. Her book, Saudi, all I can say is read it, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Ellen, there's a decline in commodities across the board. Obviously, China's slowdown. How linked is your world of oil with the general commodity malaise?
So it's definitely linked, but it's definitely not one-to-one because as we've seen, oil is rising now. And I think that has a lot to do with concerns over tensions in the Middle East and also with the news that we've got a whole bunch of draws in terms of the stockpiles in the U.S. And so that's a signal that consumption is doing well, that demand is doing pretty well, although there are some hints that maybe it's not quite as good as we think. Mostly because refineries are not running at full speed. There really isn't an indication that they need to. And so we're just kind of drawing more on our stockpiles. And then you've got economic data. Recently, it seems that traders have taken the recent unemployment data as very heartening in terms of the economy. Though personally, I would caution against reading too much into any kind of unemployment data.
So what's really driving the show here today for global crude, Ellen? Is it demand concerns? Is it supply? What's really moving these markets here today?
That's a good question. I think it's both. I think it's really concerns in the Middle East right now because you've definitely got demand is always an issue. Although you'd think that if OPEC is trimming its demand forecast for the rest of the year, that would spell problems for oil. Although it could be that people think that because OPEC is trimming its demand forecast, that the OPEC country will then decide not to increase production ever so slightly in October, which will then help keep oil prices up. So that's definitely a possibility. And I do think that that's really a big move to keep an eye out for is what is OPEC going to do? Because they are set to increase supply, not by all that much, but definitely increase supply starting in October. But if the economic signs aren't there that the market can handle an increase, then they will be facing a lot of pressure to roll that back.
So who has power now? OPEC, OPEC Plus, the United States with the huge oil success we've had, or the market?
I think it's definitely the market in this case. I think the market is really running the show here, and OPEC is just kind of tweaking here or there. And in terms of the United States, it's kind of ignoring the market in a sense. Oil production is high, oil production is strong, but that has a lot to do with exports. The fact that Europe is basically sanctioning all of Russian oil has definitely been a boon for the U.S. export market because they are available. comfortable there. We've got oil, we can export it. And in addition, there's no impediment really other than, anything happening in the Gulf of Mexico, potentially any kind of hurricanes, to getting that oil to Europe the same way there is in the Middle East when you've got to use the Suez Canal, or you've got to get through the Persian Gulf. Those are real hotspots right now. And we don't really see that in terms of U.S. exports.
So, Ellen, has Europe effectively weaned itself completely off of Russian energy? I mean, we're a couple of years into this war here. I know there was big concerns that first winter, but they seem to have kind of found other sources, I guess?
That is a really good question. And I think that this independence from Russian energy has not really been put to the test because we haven't seen a difficult winter. If the coming winter is somewhat more difficult, somewhat colder, then I think we'll really be putting that to the test. But really what's happened is American liquefied natural gas came to the rescue, and we were able to really increase our exports of liquefied natural gas to meet that demand from Europe. And now we even see Britain thinking about putting in an LNG import terminal just so it doesn't have to rely on the rest of Europe to get natural gas. Really, natural gas is a huge issue here, and I don't think that we have seen the last of this story.
So the 47 meetings I went to 47 years ago on LNG, and it never happened. Can you now say the LNG market is distributing and supplying and demanding what the promises were 30 and 40 years ago?
I do think so. And, it's funny because I remember back in, 2013 when I was speaking with some oil guys, and they were like, no, we're never going to be exporting LNG. It's not going to happen. Well, it's happening.
Okay, Ellen Wald, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Ellen Wald, the Atlantic Council there on the oil. We got to get, Rich, make a note, please. We got to get Amrita Sen on. I don't know where she is, but she's probably taking a month off. Knowing, that's the way they roll there.
Yep, absolutely.
They take like 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Brent crude here, Tom. I mean, we're right back above $80 here, $80.36 here. It seems to be in a trading range though, and I'm always try to get a sense of what's really moving things. Is it supply? Is it demand? It feels like it's a demand-driven market. We kind of know what supply is now in this new world order with Russia and so on, and it's just a question of where the markets think global demand is going to be.
Yeah, I think it's just open, other than if I bring up, folks, BCOM index on the Bloomberg Professional Service, and I bring up a weekly chart, something more general, not the daily. I'm sorry, it's from the peak of 2022. I think it's called a decline.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like we're back to fall of 2021 pricing.
And here the John Tucker Inflation Index, the daily national average gasoline price, $3.44 a gallon for Tucker.
It's amazing how Bloomberg takes that data from Wawa.
Exactly, the Wawa.
It's amazing how
that's our data source.
Our data source is to follow economics as well. Thank you, Commonwealth, for your support of our economic indicators. It's a really, really interesting week. Is it nuts like 2 weeks ago? No, I'm not going to kid you. But there it is. Tomorrow we lead off with the important NFIB Small Business Optimism Survey. PPI tomorrow. Paul's better at that than I am. I memorized it like 30 years ago, and they changed. They changed the rules in midstream. CPI on Wednesday, August 14th. And then retail sales right behind on August 15th. So we're going to have, 24, 25 hours head spinning starting August 14th. We'll give you full coverage of that. Michael McKee will drop by, and we have a lot of good guests and conversations. Doesn't end there. It goes right on 15th and 16th as well. Futures up 16. Dow futures up 80. Dow level 39,700. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures advancing with a big week of data on tap. We have the July Producer Price Index out Tuesday, U.S. Consumer Price Index for July out Wednesday. Now in June, CPI posted its first drop in 2 years after showing no change in May. Thursday, we're on to July retail sales. We'll also get the weekly report of initial jobless claims, industrial production. Friday, housing starts, and consumer sentiment. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 71 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 98 points. S&P futures up about 0.3%, or 18 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.93%, and that is little change. Shares of Hawaiian Electric, they're lower, down about 10%. It issued a going concern warning. It also pegged losses from liabilities from the wildfires at $1.7 billion. Now, we've also been talking about the price of gold. Rose to the highest in a week. Well, now Bloomberg reporting Olympic gold medals. They're worth more than ever at this year's Paris Games. The raw materials go into them. They pushed the worth up to about $900 a piece. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
That's cool. I mean, I've heard different numbers, but
yeah,
that's
the gold
amount of gold that's in there.
Yeah. Silver is actually also increasing too in their price too, but $900, that's what they can get.
I'm afraid to ask, what about bronze?
Yeah, that's not in the report.
That's out at aisle four at Home Depot. I'm kidding. It's a huge accomplishment, say the least. Futures up 17. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Economic indicators, a busy economic week, and we thank Commonwealth for their support. Our economic indicators are brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. This has been not only well-timed, but it's been grievously too long since we talked to him. Ari Wald joins us now, head of technical analysis at Oppenheimer. Ari, if you're in a trend like up and you break it on a Monday a week ago and you recover, how do you know you're back on trend?
Well, that's the key point is whether we broke it or not last Monday. Our argument has been that we did not break it, that I think one real simple proxy for trend, I think everyone on their Bloomberg terminal can just look at price and pull up a 200-day average and just assume as long as you're still above that 200-day average, the long-term uptrend is still intact. And that's what we have for the S&P 500, as well as most of the major market averages, a pullback into a rising 200-day average too, no less. In our view, a pullback in an uptrend, and the assumption is that the trend should prevail to the upside.
So from a technical perspective, Ari, what did we experience last Monday, particularly in the morning of last Monday, because it just, quote unquote, felt like panic? What did you see from a technical perspective?
Yeah, and obviously we were trying to keep it very simple there with that 200-day average, but it's important to look at the mosaic and see what's going on. And I kind of think about it, what hasn't changed and what did change is, what hasn't changed, the trend is still higher. Market coming off this very meaningful level of broad-based participation in July with over 300 net new highs on the NYSE, typically characterizes a bullish environment, argues against the top, understanding that bull markets don't move in a straight line. As far as, and even with that said, we've had this tremendous spike in the volatility index, the VIX. We had a reset in the investor and sentiment polls. Also typically occurring, you typically see those types of conditions closer to a bottom than a top. Here's what has changed. Significant breakdown in interest rates and a bit of a subtle shift in market leadership as well suggests that this bull market is maturing. Perhaps we're later in this bull market than previously thought. So what is the quality of this next rally going to look like? Are we going to continue to see very defensive leadership and a failure and fewer stocks participating? I think that sets the stage for what could be a reset in 2025. But as it stands, I think year-end rally ahead.
What percentage of stocks, as a general statement, are participating in the bull market? Is it a normal percent? Is it under or over?
One of our favorite indicators we like to track is the percentage of NYSE stocks above their 200-day average. You can track it on Bloomberg. The ticker is TradePaus, TRADPAUS index.
Are you
coming off a reading?
Whoa. Make a note. Ari's got to come back. He's quoting Bloomberg functions. That's a good thing. Ari, continue with that thought.
it's a great indicator. And what we found, and it's coming off a reading of 70% in July. Those are the very high readings that I was speaking about. And what we found is at a market top, typically there's going to be a new S&P high and a reading in that indicator below 60%. That's what typifies your narrowing of participation and a reversal signal to the downside. So if we push higher into year end, it's going to be important for the trade pause index to get back above 60%. A failure to do so would be called a divergence, and that would be much more troublesome looking ahead. So
talk to us about breadth in this market here, Ari. I mean, a lot of folks were raising concern that the focus on this Magnificent Seven, the trading, just so much of it was in those 7 stocks. That can't be good from a technical support perspective. What's the story there now?
Yeah, I think that was a rhetoric from bears, but if you looked at it, it generally wasn't the case. It was beyond that. Now, there was very narrow leadership, but that's different than narrow participation. When these big trillion-dollar companies are going to put up robust gains, yes, they're going to capture much more of the performance of a cap-weighted index like the S&P 500. We'd actually argue, in looking at the NASDAQ 100 as our proxy for those big stocks, that the steadiness of the gains have actually been underappreciated. And the divide between growth and non-growth, driven by how poorly the rest of the market has performed through the years, the case for catch-up looking ahead. You got, in terms of participation, though, you had a Russell 2000 coming off of new cycle highs. Actually, most of the major market averages coming off of new cycle highs. So I think it's broader than many gave it credit for. With that said, every time we got to these points where an everything rally was about to develop, we ran into these volatility shocks. And once again, we're in another drop to the downside here. So directional improvement in breadth, like to see it broader. And again, once again, we're just in this same pattern that we've been in throughout this bull cycle.
What's the technical structure of the Mag 7, the Magnificent 7?
As we think about opportunities on this pullback, our focus would go to those stocks first in the NASDAQ 100. As I think about stocks coming off positions of strength, coming off of new cycle highs, maintaining breakout levels above, their peak levels from 2021, above their 200-day average, we still think we're in a tech-led, growth-led, secular bull market, and market volatility, near-term volatility withstanding, I think they remain the long-term leaders of the cycle.
Hey, Ari, Tom keeps us focused on the VIX here, and boy, a week ago today, it was spiking up above 60. Tom, of course, was conveniently absent that day, but now we're back down to a level of 20. What's going on with the VIX?
The skyrocketed to 65. What's amazing about that, kind of looking back over the last 30 plus years, the analogs would have been the depths of the great financial crisis in 2008, as well as the COVID lows as well. And so while readings above 30 historically followed by strong market returns, you typically get those types of conditions towards the end of a bear market cycle. But what we looked at this past week is when you get those high readings and the S&P is still above a 200-day average, you still typically get strong, robust returns looking forward. So I think from that contrarian perspective, the point is too late to sell.
Ari,
this is market low.
Hugely valuable. Ari, thank you. Really dovetails with Ari Wald at Oppenheimer as well. And Paul, that really dovetails with what we heard from Brian Belsky of BMO Capital Markets. You take a fundamental view, Brian's just saying get on board, and you take Ari's view and he's saying get on board. And I mean, and then I dovetail that with economic belief, and what my belief is doesn't matter. But the answer is, they're not the consensus opinion. I think they're a little bolder than maybe what the consensus is right now.
Yeah, the consensus, it seems like if you think just flash back a week ago today, right at this hour, the markets were really seizing here, and people were trying to get a sense of, oh boy, did we just miss something that big happened, maybe starting Friday with the jobs data, over the weekend with Japan? And then I think with a couple of days of hindsight here, I think people have a better sense of what we saw a week ago today was a little bit more of a technical correction in the marketplace. And we saw some better stability throughout the trading last week.
The stability's there for us, 20.52 in the VIX futures, up 13. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning Always brought to you by Interactive Brokers Portfolio Analyst. Consolidate and analyze all your financial accounts on one powerful dashboard for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analyst at ibkr.com/free PA. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, President Biden says he dropped his re-election bid because congressional Democrats told him he was hurting their chances in November. He spoke on CBS Sunday Morning. Bloomberg's Laura Davidson has more.
So this is the first time we've really heard from him, publicly, specifically about, his decision to drop out weeks ago. And it's clear that it was the pressure from other Democrats in the party that really led him to make this decision. He said he didn't want to be a distraction. He didn't want to be a drag on down ballot Democrats. He even at one point even specifically mentioned former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as being someone who was at the forefront of that campaign.
Meanwhile, former President Trump plans to sit down for an interview tonight on X with its owner, Elon Musk. The billionaire is promising an unscripted conversation with no limits on subject matter. Musk often butted heads with Trump when he was in the White House, but he endorsed the former president after the attempt on his life last month. And Trump's campaign is claiming it was hacked by foreign sources with the intent to interfere in the upcoming election. Michael Kaiser, president of Defending Digital Campaigns, says it's easy for any campaign to neglect cybersecurity.
The clock is always ticking, right? It's only about winning, and money can always be spent in ways, should only be spent in ways to help them win. And that can sometimes be a conflict with security.
Michael Kaiser, president of Defending Digital Campaigns. The Illinois County Sheriff, Jack Campbell, who has faced mounting pressure following the death of a woman in her home after she called 911 for help, is retiring. The announcement comes after Campbell helped hire Sean Grayson, who prosecutors say shot and killed Sonia Massey on July 6th. Campbell also says he has even had death threats to his life related to the case. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
This is so important. We're going to do it tomorrow. The New York Times out with a very important article, which gets to the heart of the matter. Paul, lobster roll, hot or cold?
Wow, I'm going cold, but
I'm going cold.
Yeah.
Michael, lobster roll, hot or cold?
Either way.
Lobster, it's a red thing.
Okay. I'm thinking White Castle sliders, but I guess, you know what? I like hot food, so I'm going to have to go with hot.
But it has to be cold. It has mayonnaise in it.
But you can put mayonnaise, even when it's hot, you just put it there and then you go.
Yeah. Toughest assignment.
You don't let it sit out in the sun for 8 hours.
Portia Wilson at the New York Times, definitive, and they even mentioned David Gurr in the bottom of the article. They got Reds. They go up to Wiscasset. Gurr is up there right now, and he sends me a photo this weekend.
Yeah.
The line at Reds went across the water to Waldoboro. Like the line. David was so far back in the line waiting at Reds for lobster, you couldn't see Reds.
Interesting.
Is that?
All right. I think it's
his children were starving.
Well, this is the time of year. This is the time of year.
The Gurr fam was starving at Reds in Wiscasset. We say good morning to David Gurr, North, smarter than we are. And we particularly note Portia Wilson with a tough job at the New York Times, putting on 10 pounds, doing lobster rolls off of the New York Times Amex card. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen to kick off a new trading week. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 48 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 58 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 13 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.06%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 3.94%, and that is little change. To commodity, spot gold higher, $2,444 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $80 a barrel. WTI crude, $77 a barrel. Companies making news: Disney. They unveiled their expansion plans. That includes a new area devoted to the movie villains with Florida's Magic Kingdom. It's also planning 4 new cruise ships. Disney shares are little changed. And Universal Music. It's penned a licensing deal with Meta, and that's allowing its music to appear on WhatsApp. We have Universal Music. Their ADRs down about 0.6%. Meta down about 0.1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Matt Winkler darkens the door again. He hasn't taken a day off since 1998.
No,
that's all there is to it. He's the founder of Bloomberg News. Full disclosure, you hired me, so I have to be nice. Matt, you got a tour de force here because you tip conventional wisdom on its head. I gave a speech up in Toronto, and the room froze with a wonderful panel ad, including David Rosenberg up there, froze over the political maelstrom of Canada. You link what's going on in America, particularly with Harris Walls, with what Mr. Trudeau's facing. And I want to read one sentence here, folks, which is classic Matt Winkler. The 3.2% population increase last year was the most since 1957, at the height of the post-World War II baby boom, when I was dreaming of playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is short-term agony versus long-term growth, isn't it?
It's great to be with you, Tom. Look, the reality is that Justin Trudeau, since he was elected in 2015, really had a lot to do with transforming the Canadian economy for the better. Now, much of those achievements, whether it's making the cabinet 50% women, the Supreme Court is now women mostly, turning Canada into a trade powerhouse. The Canadian dollar, unlike any other currency, has held its own in the G7. Its GDP has outperformed the G7 for the first time. None of his predecessors could do what happened in the past 8 years with him. And technology has also become a much bigger weighting in corporate Canada. But the big one, you just mentioned it, is demography. Unlike any of the G7 countries, Canada, thanks to Trudeau's policies at a time when Trump was, as you know, xenophobic, Canada said, we want immigrants, and it has changed the trajectory of the economy. So as Canadians look south, as they will do in the months ahead, and look at the Harris Walls juggernaut, they're going to be reminded that Bidenomics was preceded by Trudeau economics, and Trudeau economics was all about investing in Canada.
So what's the pushback for Mr. Trudeau about this immigration? How has that manifested itself?
Well, like any issue, the chronic, if you like, issue of housing unaffordability in Canada, which we've written about and everybody else has, comes up again and again. And unfortunately, immigrants are particularly caught in the crosshairs, conveniently so, or inconveniently so.
Always.
And you know, over the long term, that will get resolved because Canada, as you know, has plenty of space. There's plenty of ways to build houses and infrastructure everywhere. So over time, that will get resolved. But the lasting, if you will, benefit is that every country needs workers. Every country.
They have a card-carrying immigrant. The first time Winkler came up to me one day, I don't even know where the men's room is at Bloomberg. I'm so new. And Winkler goes, "Can you go do a panel at Reuters?" I'm like, "Sure." So I show up, and Chrystia Friedland's there. I didn't even know who she's working for at the time. She's a Ukrainian family in Canada. And remind me, man, she's foreign minister now?
She's the deputy prime minister. She also happens to be a Rhodes Scholar. She also happens to be, one of the most respected authorities on what became known as the oligarchs in Russia, because before she became a leading politician in the Liberal Party, where she is now, she was one of the most distinguished columnists for the Financial Times and wrote about Russia after the Cold War.
May I respectfully suggest that when Air Canada 1 lands in Vancouver now with Mr. Trudeau on it, they're not showing up like for Vice President Harris where there's no audience. So help me here with his ability to win the next election.
Well, unfortunately, corporate media, I would say everybody's included there, has not focused particularly on the economy in the U.S., right? I've been on this show a couple times to talk about the seven swing
Rich,
states.
did he just throw me under the Bloomberg bus?
And by the way, now we've got polls saying she's doing very well in all those swing states. Funny that should be the case.
What about Trudeau?
Well, the reason is because the economy is doing well, and the economy is doing well in Canada too. It's just that, journalists have not bothered to cover it.
What do you make of this early run by Vice President Kamala Harris here? Is this a honeymoon? Is this something more than a honeymoon? What do you make of
Well,
what
the
we've
New
seen
York Times and others would like to say it's a honeymoon, but they said that 2 weeks ago. It's clearly more than a honeymoon because the money that's being raised and the crowds that we're seeing wherever she goes prove that it's a juggernaut, and we're not even at the convention yet. So, honeymoon is premature. It was a declaration by the media, but that's something goes way back to boys on the bus trying to dictate what the campaign should be, and this is no longer in the control of media types. This is something that really is happening in front of our eyes.
Can we give a window, folks, into Winkler 101? We're going here unscripted. I'm going to get in trouble. Mr. Musk is quote-unquote interviewing Mr. Trump today. I went mental because I drank the Kool-Aid.
I heard you.
And I said, it's not an interview, it's a conversation. Is that what do you call it when someone like Elon Musk is interviewing the former president today? It's not an interview.
Yeah, I think you've got that right. It's a conversation. He's not a journalist, so to call it an interview seems a stretch.
I mean, this is the first battle I had with Winkler. We're in a room with like 15 people. He's serving, it's a full breakfast and the whole thing. And they're saying people were laid off. And I go, they're not laid off, Matt. They were fired. Layoff is from the 1930s.
You come back.
When you come back. Right, Matt?
Yeah, that's
layoffs is just like, they're not laid off.
Yeah.
And that's how the Bloomberg way was written, was arguing about this stuff.
Matt, what do you expect the Trump campaign how do you expect them to respond to what is, in your words, a juggernaut here, at least in the early days for the Harris campaign?
With difficulty, I think sums it up. Not expecting Harris, first of all, to be the candidate. That's a surprise to them, at least. Mm-hmm. And she's completely different than, of course, President Biden. Considerably younger, for one thing. But there's more to it than that. She's a completely different political foil for Trump and the campaign. And presumably they would like him to focus on policy, but what seems to be the case over and over again is his penchant to focus on personality and her personality and her background. And that's not a winning strategy.
We're out of time. Congratulations. This is what Bloomberg Opinion is about, folks, where Winkler's publishing like every other day or every third day, whatever, with Shin Pei. And the answer is every once in a while there's a home run deep to left field. And that is this brilliant essay on a Canada I did not
know. A lot of math,
Matt Winkler, the former
numbers.
editor-in-chief, founder of Bloomberg News as well. I'll get that out on social here as we go. Who were those guys? I'm watching last night. And they get up on the stage, and Jimmy Fallon goes there from Versailles, and his band's playing in front of 100 million people. And I'd never even heard of him. And of course, woe is me. They're like Lisa. They'd be like in Brooklyn. They'd be playing like in Brooklyn, and
we're not the Brooklyn.
We're not the. What do I know? Phoenix from France. You heard them last night at the closing of the Olympics.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, all in attendance today. Attendance was taken today.
I know everybody's back.
Our producer, Cy
like...
Benson, he took attendance. I was like, OMG, we're all here.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Where else would you want to be? None of this phoning it in for us.
There's no work from home here.
No.
Futures up 12. Nice lift to the market. Gentle lift. We'll see what happens here, but big economic data this week. We're going to go to Tom Porcelli here in a moment. We're going to keep this short. Expert on wage dynamics, among other things. He's with PGIM, Fixed Income. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. It's the number one thing you can do for me. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on YouTube. You go YouTube, Bloomberg Podcasts, you find it. We'll come up. We're doing a photo shoot today. Lisa's allowed us to be in it.
Oh, okay. Good.
Her people called up and said, it's Lisa Mateo. I was like,
I mean, she has her own makeup people, her own
people
hair people,
and the hair.
lighting people.
I think she's working Celine today as well. Something like, hey, we got a photo shoot today to drive forward the social. We're on Apple CarPlay. We're on Android Auto. Bursting out with a new Instagram effort, particularly for the Pacific Rim. We guessed wrong. We're humbled by the attendance on YouTube from the Pacific Rim. Good evening to Singapore, Manila, all the way up to Tokyo as well, and over to India, which is a ginormous YouTube market. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we have futures posting modest gains. Traders getting ready for more data. It's going to shed some light on the outlook of interest rates. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 50 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 53 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 13 points. Fed Governor Michelle Bowman, she said she still sees upside risk for inflation, continued strength in the labor market. Let's get to the data out this week. Tomorrow we have a report on U.S. producer prices. Wednesday, July's consumer price index. Also, we have retail sales, industrial production, and housing starts this week. We have the bond market, the 2-year yield, 4.06%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.95%, and that's up 1 basis point. Not much earnings today, but this week we'll hear from Walmart, Home Depot, also Deere. They will all open their books. And shares of JetBlue Airways falling down 9%, announced a $400 million convertible senior notes offering. Starbucks up 2%. Report that from the Wall Street Journal that Starboard Value is taking a stake in the company. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Without further ado, Tom Porcelli with us, Chief U.S. Economist, PGIM, and absolutely critically here with a real understanding of wage dynamics. Let's start with inflation. Tom Porcelli, PPI, CPI, back to back. What do you expect?
Yeah, so good to be with you as always. I hope everyone is enjoying their summer. Look, I think that CPI, I'm looking at my trusty Bloomberg screen, it looks like consensus is at 2/10. I have no problem with that. I think it'll probably wind up being a soft 2/10. But, Tom, what's really interesting is, I was just talking about this in one of our morning meetings, we've spent so much time looking at inflation out to like the hundredths place, right? I mean, I feel like that's all we've been doing over the last, 6 or more months in particular. I don't think the hundredths place matters that much anymore. I mean, I think, you get a 2/10, whether it's a firm or a soft 2/10. I don't know that matters as it relates to what the Fed is going to do in September, specifically as it relates to cutting or not, right? Like the Fed is now going to cut, whether it's 0.16 core CPI or 0.23 core CPI. I don't think that's where that makes a difference anymore. I think where you can have still a conversation about the sort of the degree of inflation that we're experiencing now is the degree of cuts that the Fed will give. So, look, a quarter of a percentage point cut is coming in at September. I think if you continue to get some modestly soft prints in CPI, I think that probably keeps the door open to a 50. But it's going to be about labor now, I think, more than anything, and that's my bigger point. I don't know how much inflation matters today as much as the labor data do, and we're going to get 2 more labor reports between now and September, and I think that'll dictate.
So, Tom, if we just kind of rewind, really a week ago, right this moment, the market was really in a kind of a panic mode, if you will, trying to piece together all the labor information. We got that previous Friday with what's going on in Japan. What do you think is the economic outlook here? What is the risk here? Is the Fed risk being too late to the rate cutting party and pushing this economy maybe to a place of risk it doesn't want to be?
Yeah, I think that risk is very present right now, them being too late. I mean, I think you could make the argument that they should have been cutting already. One of the things that we've been flagging, so there's two important ideas here. So one on inflation. Look, I think when everyone was sort of really focused on supercore, which is an idea that we never had a lot of sympathy for, I think everyone was sort of missing what was going on from an inflation perspective. I think this is especially true within the Fed, who were very focused on supercore. I think if you just took headline CPI, took core CPI, and stripped shelter out of both of those, you have been running at around a 2% pace for many, many months at this point, right? I think that to me was always sort of the irony of supercore. I mean, supercore was basically, they were trying to get at stripping out shelter prices and stripping out a few other things, which I think they probably should not have. But I think if we all recognize that there's a problem with shelter, the calculation for shelter prices, then strip that out, and inflation was not a problem. But I think the bigger challenge for us has been, we've been highlighting this for quite some time, that there are all these cracks forming from a labor market perspective, and that would have argued, months ago that the Fed should have been seriously entertaining scaling back all the tightening that they put in place.
Tom, to your acclaim, economists are like they're all the same, and all of a sudden you go, who is that guy? And your acclaim is the dynamic of our wages rising. We like to think that, but against inflation. Now, inflation, I believe, is declining. Is the positive real wage growth sustaining, or is it fragile?
I think it's very fragile. I think, and again, everyone should prove this to themselves. Just look at real spending year on year, and then look at the change in the unemployment rate year on year, and look at that relationship. The consumption tends not to respond well when the unemployment rate is rising. And I think that's the real challenge for the economic backdrop. I mean, I see slower growth in the months to come. I still think that we can avoid a recession, but the Fed has to get on with it to basically help in that regard. But it's going to be a close one.
Hey, Tom, we're also going to get some retail sales later this week. We're going to hear from some of the big retailers as well with their quarterly earnings. How do you think the consumer's holding up out there? What's your most recent read there?
I think the consumer is sort of hanging in there, and I think the consumer can continue to hang in there. I mean, per that observation in that chart I highlighted a moment ago, the consumer will tend to slow down when the unemployment rate is on the rise. But slowing doesn't necessarily mean that it has to outright fall. I mean, I think you can look back at, sort of the 2001 recession, or even the 1970 recession. I mean, the consumer can hang in there, and that's what we expect can continue to happen. But it hanging in there, I just want everyone to be clear on this. It doesn't mean that you avoid slowing. Consumption is going to slow, which is very consistent with the rise in the unemployment rate.
Tom Porcelli, give us scope and scale on where the unemployment rate is heading. I mean, do you model out decimal points, or can you put a 5 handle out there somewhere?
Yeah, I think that you can. I think that this can get up to a 5 handle. I mean, and it's funny, Tom. We say that now when the unemployment rate's at 4.3%. It doesn't sound very heroic, but I think that that's sort of where our head has been. That this could easily get up to a 5 handle. Our view is unchanged in that regard.
Tom Porcelli, thank you so much with PGIM this morning. Into inflation, PPI tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, key 2 days here this week, CPI, and then retail sales on Thursday with the leadership of Michael McKee. Futures up 11 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Biden is giving his fullest explanation yet for why he decided to end his re-election campaign. In an interview on CBS Sunday Morning, he described the pressure within his own party to step aside, and he named the former Speaker of the House.
I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. You'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say, why did someone, and I thought it'd be a real distraction.
President Biden said it's most important that Democrats defeat former President Trump. CBS Sunday Morning can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Vice President Kamala Harris has followed up her swing state tour with a fundraiser in San Francisco. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more.
Harris returned to her home base, raising more than $12 million in an event attended by top California Democrats. Guests at the event included Tom Steyer, San Francisco Giant CEO Larry Baer, Hollywood mogul Jeffrey Katzenberg, along with former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Governor Gavin Newsom. Her campaign also is reporting she raised $310 million in July. Now, the new New York Times and Siena College poll shows her running 6 points ahead in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, outside the 2.5% margin of error. And the latest Bloomberg Morning Consult poll says even with Donald Trump in the aggregate swing states. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Meanwhile, Ohio Senator and Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance sat down to discuss recent criticism against a comment Vance made on childless cat ladies. Speaking on ABC's This Week with Jonathan Karl, Vance is accusing the Harris campaign of distorting his words.
There's so much that we want to do, John, to make the country more pro-family. And I think it is frankly shameful that the Harris administration has lied about what I actually said.
J.D. Vance on ABC's This Week, which can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg. And finally, former President Donald Trump will sit down with an interview with Elon Musk on his platform X tonight. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
You know, Kit Harington, just imagine the life thing of Game of Thrones, of just being Jon Snow in Game of Thrones. And he's been knocking around trying to find a new part. And he is lighting it up supposedly in Industry, which is basically like Succession. He's playing Sir Henry Muck. It's a technology Succession kind of thing. It's on, I think, HBO. And I wanted to help out. Okay. So they got the brokerage firm's shot, and there's the big wall in the background.
Uh-oh.
And you can just hear the producers going, can you get some fossil on with a bow tie? I mean, you know, they don't make these decisions based off my good looks. But thank you to Industry and all, in the excitement of
the residual checks just
flooding in. It was amazing. I bought somebody sent in a note. They said, what'd you do with it? And I said, the first check, I bought a case of Tang.
Yeah.
It was great. It went out to Costco with Lisa and loaded it up. $45. I got 6 months supply of Tang. But thank you so much. And thank you to all. We have a whole division at Bloomberg that does this. They're trying to place Michael Barr, Detroit Lions hat.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I'm about as lucky as a tornado watch, man. That's not going to happen.
Thank you to our team in L.A. and New York who do the media thing for us. And thank you to Industry. I got to watch now. It's
we
got
to watch
reviews.
Okay. I want to see this.
It's like third season, so I got to go back and watch the first season, the second season. And
I just finished The Bear, so now I got some free time.
You know.
All right. Lots of train rides.
It's a big Wall Street shot.
Okay.
Industry.
Television series.
I had some makeup on, detailed.
I didn't say I know that dude. I know him.
There you go.
I'm proud of you, man.
We're in billions and something. It's like they're all bad people. That's what the problem, folks, is. You see these shows and you think everybody in finance is bad. They're not. Some are 6'5" with a trust fund as well. That would not be me. Futures up 10, Dow futures up 36. Enough on that. The VIX 20.59. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. A little bit of relief from that volatility that went through the markets last week over concerns the Fed is waiting too long to cut interest rates. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 37 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 45 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 11 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.06%, little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.96%. That's up 1 basis point. Commodities, oil extending its first weekly gain since early July. It comes as OPEC trimmed forecast for global oil demand this year and next. We have Brent crude $80 a barrel, WTI crude $77 a barrel. And gold rose to the highest in a week. We have spot gold higher, $2,444 an ounce. Currencies, after that surge last week, the yen dropped the most against the dollar among its major peers. Right now, it's down about 1% at 148.09 against the dollar. And Bitcoin up nearly 2% at about 59,000. Apple fans looking for those innovations when new iPhones are introduced next month. Well, they could be disappointed. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman reports iPhone 16 models, well, there'll be a stopgap to keep sales stable until a bigger overhaul next year. That's what he says. Talk to Mark Gurman. Apple up about 0.1%. And Chinese media reporting Foxconn, which assembles iPhones for Apple, it's recruited 50,000 workers as it gets ready for next month's iPhone 16 lineup. More workers. Yeah.
Are you done?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All you. Thank you.
That's fine. My head's spinning. Ari, the phone's ringing off the hook. CCA's on the phone in Los Angeles. So this show, Ari, Industry exclamation point, it's on HBO and Max. Is that right? Ari, should I begin at the third season with Kit Harington and me on Industry, or should I go back and watch the first season as well? Okay, got to watch all. We're going to go back to the first season. We'll report out there somewhere. David Bianco with us right now, CIO Americas, DWS. How'd your view change after last week?
Not much. A little bit of a surprise with the overreaction on the the legendary yen carry trade and the way it really hit Japanese stocks. We do think there's a buying opportunity in Japan, and I think the yen carry trade's important. But American investors, particularly American technology investors, they really shouldn't be scared off by that phenomenon. I would tell you that while we were watching global markets and all kinds of other issues in the world, we were paying attention to earnings season. I'm going to say right up front that I have a different take on the second quarter earnings season than what many are saying. While it's true that the growth overall is strong, 10% year on year, and even excluding the Magnificent Seven Grade 8, it's up about 4%, and we haven't seen growth outside of the Magnificent Seven Grade 8 for a while. There's no rotation or change in earnings growth leadership, and I don't think we should have a change in performance leadership either. Actually, the earnings growth is still really mostly tech and communications, and still the same leading, very big companies out of financials, certain ones out of healthcare. Really, it's been mixed elsewhere, and it's been still weak at consumer goods, and it's getting weaker at consumer services now. So I have to say, we have not seen a broadening of earnings strength at the S&P, not at the Russell 2000 either, still sluggish.
So as we think about performance in the stock market going forward, will it be the same old leaders, the big tech names and some of the other sectors? And is that still going to be what's going to lead this market higher?
Yeah, and it's hard to get a change in leadership without a little bit of volatility along the way. Regime changes don't tend to be entirely peaceful. But I think the market overall has a little bit more downside into the autumn, about 5%. I think this is still a good time to lighten up and prepare for some better opportunities in the autumn. But financials, healthcare, those are things we still like. We still like utilities too. That's doing very well. Defense stocks. But when it comes to auto, retailers, transportation, we don't see it yet.
Paul, I haven't asked this question in ages. Up 1.1%. Brent crude, $80.54. Yeah. Nobody's talking energy. All my radar's up.
Yeah, it's been quiet there. The energy sector was not an earnings growth contributor during the second quarter, but the energy sector is no longer that big of a sector, not even that big of an earnings contributor anymore. I think energy earnings will be flattish for the rest of the year and for possibly quite a long time. Nevertheless, it does represent value. It's cheap. It represents a geopolitical hedge that could be useful in the coming months and years, but it's not exactly the most promising high return industry.
So how about valuation here? I'm just looking, when we did trough that Monday morning last week, we were down, 8-9% on the S&P from its recent high. We've bounced back a little bit here. How do you think about valuation?
Still very demanding, even with the little bit of a retreat in 10-year yields and 10-year TIPS yields, which is welcome. It's very welcome to see 10-year yields drop during an equity sell-off rather than climb and be a cause of an equity sell-off. So we're getting that diversification across asset classes, but it also then leaves us with, well, is this decline in yields temporary on the idea that people are still nervous about things like yen carry trade unwind or geopolitical? It's hard to know, and I'm still doubtful that the 10-year yield is going to stay under 4% outside of a recession.
Okay, so I guess the question there is, what are we doing on the fixed income space here? Do we sit in my 2-year treasury at 4.06%, or do I take some credit risk here? Do some more?
Yeah, so up until recently, there were really good opportunities at the 2-year, 3-year duration point. I might even go shorter than that now to 1 year. I still think there are opportunities in muni markets.
Nice, that's what we're talking.
Yeah, I know it's not.
I love the muni market.
I like it too.
Preaching to the choir
but,
here.
And there, I think in the muni market you can take some credit risk and even some maturity longer duration risk. And for those who believe that tax rates are going up, you'll value that part of the portfolio.
Do you have a confidence? Like, you're not a strategist. You're a guy that runs real money. But the answer is, people have a confidence when they say the S&P, our year 12-month target's 5,600. Was that confidence shattered last week?
There's been plenty of things to be not confident about the past year and few years. And thank you. We do run real money at DWS, and I still think of myself as a macro-minded, intrinsic investor and spend a lot of time focused on the S&P 500 and its fundamental drivers like earnings and trying to give indications to our portfolio managers with sector industry preferences. But the point is, this is not a time to be confident about anything. There's a lot of uncertainty out there from the basics. Will we have a recession or not? Will there be a change in earnings leadership, performance leadership or not? And we do have an important election ahead, and it's still an uncertain world.
David Bianco, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it with DWS. Everybody's got to republish. It's August, and you're supposed to wait. Well, we're going to put out a big piece 6 days after Labor Day, and I'm like, okay, well, write it now.
No.
After what we heard last week, and are you taking a month? You work for a German bank. Are you taking a month off?
A couple of weeks.
and those are Wall Street weeks, which
Exactly.
are, I got to call in on Monday, but we're fine.
That's right.
David Bianco, thank you.
Thank you.
So do they really do that, Paul, in Europe? I mean, they take a month off.
They do, and I think it's a great deal. We should follow suit, I think.
Okay,
so, anyway.
it's good. David Bianco, thank you. Futures up 13. Let me give you levels here. I haven't done it today. 5,300, 5,400 on futures. Dow, 39,700. SPX, I got chastised. I don't do enough quota. The NASDAQ is 18,600, up 0.3%. On NASDAQ, oil moving today. That's really my headline here. Maybe off, I already had that headline on demand, or they see supply, demand, whatever. $81. Brent crude, $78. West Texas Intermediate. I think it's my attention. You mentioned Paul, gold on a dash to 2,500. We're not there yet.
No, and Tom, I think if I flash back to this moment exactly last Monday, Bitcoin was about $50,000 per token. Here we are at 59,000.
Yeah.
So,
did you day trade it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
all in.
It's called doing a McGlone. I should point out, importantly, dollar yen breaks through 147. I'm in the timeout chair. I haven't done the homework yet, but a 148.13 on yen, stronger by 1%, actually matters, to say the least. We need to get the market open on a Monday with huge economic data tomorrow, but then Wednesday and Thursday as well. We'll go beneath the headline data, always with the help of Michael McKee. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. So we have a lot of data for investors to go through this week to see where interest rates are headed. July producer price index out tomorrow. U.S. consumer price index for July out Wednesday. In June, CPI posted the first drop in 2 years after showing no change in May. So let's see how the markets are reacting on this new trading week. We'll start with the S&P 500 up about 0.2%, 12 points, 5,357. We have the Dow up 0.1%, 70 points, 39,567. The Nasdaq up 0.2%, 47 points, 16,790. We have the 2-year yield at 4.07%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.96%. That's up 1 basis point. Commodities, we have spot gold higher, 2,447 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $80 a barrel. WTI crude, $77 a barrel. And at the open, I want to check in with Disney after it unveiled its expansion plans. Right now, its shares down about 0.1%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us now in hugely valuable times is Eric Balchunas, who's definitive on exchange-traded funds. You like that I know that phrase?
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you. ETFs. And after the week we had and the stabilization, right now Dow up 52, a 19 VIX would be extraordinary. We're thrilled that he could join us this morning. Did the speculation come out of the market as measured by the Balchunas world?
A little. So we divide ETFs into two categories. The ones used by buy and hold investors, say Vanguard, Schwab, and the iShares Core Series, and ones used by traders. That would be SPY, the Qs, the ones that are real liquid from back in the day. They love liquidity traders. So if you look at the flows, number one last week was VU. So the Vanguard bid alive and well. You got some Schwab in there, VTI is in there. But when you look at the outflows of last week, you see SPY on the top, and you see HYG, and you see IWM and EEM. Those four are used by the traders. So you have a little divergence now. Trading crowd, a little spooked. Maybe they're just, putting money elsewhere for a little bit. Saw some money go into BIL, which is a short-term treasury. Treasuries actually went up. Hallelujah. You finally, bonds offset stock losses a little bit last week.
Yeah, we heard that this morning when you weren't awake. We were here. Listen to that.
I dreamt it.
You dreamt it?
I must have.
I want to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies, but this is too important. We'll save it. What did you learn about Bitcoin ETFs, given the carnage? What is it, Paul? 8 a.m., 9 a.m.?
Yeah.
Monday morning. What did you learn about the real Bitcoin ETF?
They're very resilient. I mean, I've always tried to defend the ETF investor as being stronger hands than people think, whether it's equities or bonds or anything. And we predicted the Bitcoin people, the boomers that are buying them, that's what Crypto Twitter calls them, would be stronger hands than people thought. Last week, they saw $200-ish million in outflows. That is 0.4% of the assets. So 99.6% of the assets stuck. I'd call that a win, especially on Monday. If you own iBit, you went to bed on Friday and you had your weekend, you came in Monday, you were down 15% on the weekend.
Wow.
And iBit actually saw flat flows on Monday. And as a group, I think they saw 150 million out. But iBit actually took in money net flows last week. So again, this is good because if you can hold up during the bad times, it's easy to take in flows when the price starts going up again. It's how much can you withstand? And I'd give them an A in terms of just resilience so far.
Well, a week ago, literally right at this moment, a week ago, there was panic in the marketplace. Did you feel that or see that in the ETF world yet Monday morning last week?
Not entirely. I feel like over the years, especially that last sell-off, because it wasn't totally Fed-related. There was the Japan issue.
Yep.
And I think people, outside of a COVID type situation, they generally, ETF investors, they're like, okay, I've seen this movie before. Yep. I'm not going anywhere because if I sell now, I know it'll come back and I don't want to kick myself. And more on Twitter, where there's a lot of debate amongst financial people, you can see that, especially advisors, every time there's a bad day, they're like, ignore the all caps headlines, everybody just chill. Like there's more and more voices who are on this do nothing sort of bogle front.
That's right. Yep.
And they end up being right like they were last week again. And so the more times they're right to do nothing, the more I think there'll be resilience in these sell-offs.
I want to set this up. You're the first conversation we've had. It's August, whatever. There's this scene where I look out on Central Park and I look for the first tree that changes colors. And I send John Farrow a note because they don't do this in England. I say, oh, John, the majesty of the autumnal colors. Drives him nuts because we had to explain to him that people actually go to Vermont and New Hampshire to look at leaves. That was all it's like foreign. So anyways, it's that time of year. What's active management look like into Q3, Q4, into next year?
So look, the more value stocks can do good, the better active
Fair.
and smart beta, which is a form of active, are going to do. We look at this study all the time. Anytime the Mag 7 take over, everything active and smart beta gets decimated because it's just not in the wiring of an active manager or the wiring of an index to buy stuff that's really overvalued looking. What you're doing is you're looking for good deals. So whenever value comes back, all of the stuff that's been like overlooked will have a good run. So I think that the answer to your question depends on whether value stocks will come back. Now, small caps are a good example. They had, what, a 3-week run? Now that's over. So, can anything stop the Mag 7 train? That would be the question. If they can't, active is in trouble. If they can, and you see value come back or small caps, active's in good shape for the second half.
Why, Paul, are we hoping stocks underperform so an industry can do better?
Right.
Nobody else is doing this except investment management.
Exactly. GOVZ, what is that and why should I be paying attention to it?
GOVZ is our ETF of the month. It's a recurring note we have.
Oh, you're kidding me. Do you do a full social rollout like Instagram?
They call our things franchises, so we're trying to get creative and have recurring themes.
Are you a vertical?
I think
I had a meeting once, and they said to me, "We want you to be a vertical," and I said, "Usually I'm horizontal." Continue.
So I don't have enough employees to have employee of the month, so we have ETF of the month because there's 3,000 of them. So GOVZ was our ETF of the month. This is a Treasury strips ETF from BlackRock. And TLT always gets the bets. If you think the Fed is going to cut rates,
wait a second, hold.
Everybody
What's
piles
TLT?
Are you taking notes?
I'm on it. This is the Treasury Bond ETF 20-year. Go.
Yeah, so that's the famous one.
Okay.
Strips, though, they strip out the coupon payments. You're just left with the principal, and those have a duration of 28 years. So if the Fed cuts, these go up quicker, higher than TLT. They're sort of a sharper tool to play Fed rate cuts, and they've been seeing action. The volume and the assets in this have doubled recently. So our ETF of the month, what we look for is something that's like a swell before a wave. And GOVC is starting to see some interesting action that's way out there. But you can see a little something in the distance. And so we made it our ETF of the month, especially because a lot of people think the Fed will cut rates. This thing will have more sensitivity inversely to rates going down.
How much readership does your stuff get? Is it like the most widely read stuff?
It depends what we write about, as you know.
Yes.
You remember you write about a movie,
exactly.
Box office. That would be the most read note. Yeah.
Right.
So it's interesting. What I think tends to do well is Vanguard and the VIX. Vanguard gets read because everybody in the industry is like, oh my God, what's going on? Maybe it's fear reading,
right. But
people definitely want to pay attention. And then VIX, I'll call it the spicy, crazy stuff. Anytime there's a broken ETF or something that's exotic, that does really well. What's harder is if we do something like, I don't know, here's some dividend ETFs and here's ones that are yielding more. I don't know, there's just not a ton of appetite for that. My guess is because there's not a ton of retail investors who use the terminal. It's more professionals.
Right. So what is the breakdown of ETF world today, retail versus institutional? And how's it trending?
If you count advisors as retail or not. So I'd say retail, direct retail is about 10-15%.
Okay.
Advisors are like 60-65%.
6-0.
Yeah.
Wow.
Advisors are the predominant consumer of ETFs. And then institutions, which I call asset owners, pensions, endowments, they're small, maybe 5-10%. They love the liquid ones. Right. That's the one thing they can't get anywhere else. But an institution could roll up to BlackRock and get the S&P for like 1 basis point. And they get it offline. They like the private. They like to be like special. So they don't necessarily use ETFs as robustly, but what they do like is eat the liquidity. Quickly change positions, but they don't put their core in typically.
Okay.
The Phillies are for real, aren't they? I mean, it's just amazing the way they're winning.
I think so, but we get rug pulled in Philly all the time.
Yeah.
Name a team. We get excited and then they disappoint us. And
that's true.
I got my expectations
low.
Are
you prepared for the Eagles this year to disappoint you again?
Yes, absolutely. We were 11-1 last year. And then just the wheels fell off.
Yeah.
I still don't know what happened.
It was joy to the world. Eric Balchunas, thank you so much.
The pride of Philadelphia.
Seriously, folks, with ETFs, he is the voice. He's got 2 books out. One of them, really a must-read on John Bogle, who was so supportive years ago. Eric Balchunas with Bloomberg Intelligence. Red and green on the screen right now. It's just a churn on a Monday morning. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Former President Trump plans to sit down for an interview tonight on X with its owner, Elon Musk. The billionaire is promising an unscripted conversation with no limits on subject matter. Bloomberg's Bill Ferries.
Get your popcorn out. It could be a free-for-all. We have no idea what kind of tangents that interview, as they're calling it, will go. And, when Ron DeSantis announced his candidacy on X, it was plagued by a lot of technical issues. So Elon Musk has been out there saying that they're testing the system to make sure nothing like that happens again.
Musk often butted heads with Trump when he was in the White House, but he endorsed the former president last month. President Biden is giving his fullest explanation yet for why he decided to end his re-election campaign. In an interview on CBS Sunday Morning, he described the pressure within his own party to step aside.
Polls we had showed that it was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races.
CBS Sunday Morning can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. The leaders of France, Germany, and Britain have endorsed calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, the return of scores of hostages held by Hamas, and the unfettered delivery of humanitarian aid. In a joint statement today, they endorsed the latest push by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt to broker an agreement to end the 10-month-old Israel-Hamas war. The U.S. shored up naval and air forces in the Middle East to help Israel fend off any major attack from Iran ahead of a resumption of Gaza ceasefire talks planned for later this week. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin ordered the urgent deployment of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the carrier group equipped with fighter jets and a guided missile submarine to the region. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Lisa Mateo, I was looking through the weekend here, and we were making jokes about Costco earlier in that. But have you observed any slowdown in the world of Mateo consumption? I don't see it.
No, not at all. I just went to Costco and dropped $500, so
yeah.
I didn't see it at all, and that was a nice weekend.
How many shopping carts is that? Is it embarrassing? Like, do your kids hide?
No, they're the ones filling it. I get to the counter and it's like, who put this in here?
Oh yeah.
I don't like that.
I go alone. I don't.
It adds to the list if they come along. Okay. So they just like the free the snacks that they give out.
Can I get Lisa Instagram lessons? I'm trying to figure this Instagram.
I know. I see you look frustrated.
They want me to do. Well, Paul saved me today. I've been hugely distracted by this, but they want me to do reels and stories real bad.
So fun.
I don't know, not so fun. I don't have time for that. I just want to do old Instagram.
Okay.
And they're like just telling me, no, you don't. You want to do this Lisa Mateo stuff.
You have to do it with the music and everything. I can give you offline. I can give you a little tutorial.
Okay, well, I'll need to figure out the music. I think that would be a nice value add. We had some good conversations today. Yeah, on Instagram over to YouTube, we had Kathy Jones, David Bianco, and Eric Balchunas. That's pretty cool. It's a good day. Red now on the screen. It's a little fragile. Dow, -100. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red on the screen. Bets, though, is that CPI this week won't derail Fed cuts. But right now we have NASDAQ futures down about 16 points. Dow down about 144 points. The S&P 500 down about 11 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.93%, and that is little change. We'll take a look at commodities. We have spot gold higher, $2,453 an ounce. We have Brent crude $80 a barrel. WTI crude, $77 a barrel. And as far as currencies, Japanese yen down about 0.8% at 147.85 against the dollar. Shares of Starbucks higher, up 3% after that report that activist investor Starboard Value taking an undisclosed stake in the company. And then you have shares of JetBlue Airways taking a hit, down more than 11% after announcing a $400 million convertible senior notes offering. And finally, Universal music artists like Taylor Swift, Adele, Elton John, they're going to see their songs on WhatsApp for the first time. It struck a new licensing deal with Meta. Right now, Meta down about 0.7%. Universal Music ADRs down about 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, over to you.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited about this conversation because I can tell you on an HR basis, you talk about a career shift. This is truly, on Global Wall Street, the mother of all career shifts. She was unhappy with her corner office at the new tower of JP Morgan. So she said, forget that. I'm going with the Ute of America. Steph Guild, what was it like your first meeting with Robinhood? Did you walk in like, with the basic JP Morgan blazer look and they said, what?
At first I was like, who are you talking about? Who had the mother of all career shifts? I actually was told in advance, don't wear a suit.
Really?
Make sure you put a t-shirt on. And so I had to, I thought about that and I said, wow, it was that outfit recommendation was the reinforcing to me that this was quite a shift. And it took me a while. It took me a while to make the decision.
Tell us your observation. Frankly, seriously, folks, this could be a 3-hour conversation for Global Wall Street. What do you do in strategy at Robinhood that is different than doing strategy at the big 5 banks?
Yeah, I think, your clients are very different. I spent 11 years in the private bank at JP Morgan and then 10 years in the asset management business prior to that, mostly in the U.S. equity part of it. And so you're working with people who either have spent their entire years getting advice from really good people or they themselves have been managing money. So when I made the switch, my job to me is twofold. One is contributing to bringing really strong, innovative investment products to a customer base that hasn't always had access to everything.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And second is teaching our customer base about the markets, but in a way that isn't just explaining terms, like actually using the real terms and not using all these, you're in a garden. Like I would rather use a term so when they watch Bloomberg, they understand what the hosts are saying.
This is too valuable of a conversation for me to make jokes about you and the meme stocks because Lisa's kids are trading Robinhood off the couch at home. How do you get well-meaning, well-intentioned people to pull out the time frame to long-term 30-day investment? That was a joke. How do you get them to pull out to a longer-term investment perspective?
I just think it's a matter of education, meeting them where they are. And they are on social media, they are on YouTube, they're on, I have kids too, they learn everything from YouTube. They know more than me about some things because of it. And I also think that I think they've all learned a lot. Actually, when we look at like the way that they trade and the way that they invest, we've got the Robinhood Investor Index and we get to kind of look at what they're doing regularly. Our average age customer has actually increased. And I think with time comes maturity.
The show. To what? 14 out to Lisa. How old's your daughter? 17?
She's 17, but my son's in his 20s and he's doing that.
Yeah.
So he's going online, but he's looking to the social media, how you're talking about. So how do you find,
our average age is 33.
Okay. Yeah. But what advice do you have for them? A lot of these young kids who are going on, what advice do you have for them who are going on social media and they're just believing whatever they hear?
Yeah. Just be curious, nonstop. Be like, why did they say that? What are they? What's in it for them? Even when I read things from analysts or even from hedge fund managers, I think, what's in their book, what's helping them. Just always be curious and wondering, why is someone saying that, and what would the other side of that say? I just think that's who is it, Peter Lynch, that said, if you got through 5th grade math, you can analyze a company. You can do it. You just have to spend the time doing it, and that's why I try to explain things in the context of the market. Like I have a weekly blog and I do this.
You have a weekly blog. Yes. That's really good. Steph Guild, what did you learn and what would you like to message to the Robinhood audience off of VIX at 65, closing the week at 21?
Well, maybe you should go to sleep on Sunday and wake up on Friday. But besides that, I think actually like when VIX gets to those levels, it's usually historically an opportunity. I mean, I'm not saying you should always jump in because sometimes it is a part of a greater problem. But if you take a step back and looked at what was happening in the world, I just think the markets were throwing a temper tantrum, just like they did in like December of 2018 when the Fed wanted to keep raising rates, and the market said no, you should not. And the Fed listened. And I mean, you said you have kids. When you didn't give them what they wanted, what did they do? They threw a temper tantrum. And, also the Fed, I think in 2018, taught the markets that we listened to you. And so I think they were trying to do that this time. Like, you need to cut, and you didn't commit enough to us.
Tell me about, in particularly with Robinhood's age 33 demo, whatever that demo is, and that's open to debate. But tell me how you, as an adult, blog, advise on meme stocks. Because we're sitting here as a comedy act making jokes about it. Except there's some people making money, and there's a lot of people getting crushed by the volatility in meme stocks. How do you deal with it? You have
to know. I mean, a couple of things. One is that, I think the meme stock stuff, we're the vehicle. We don't come out and say, go out and do this, right? But secondly, I think it's kind of interesting that you are watching a generation of people express their views, and they fundamentally are changing the makeup of a company, right? Like if you think about some of these companies, they have been able to raise capital and they've been able to take down debt, and they could end up being completely turned around companies because of it, because of their shareholder base believing in them and whatever that means for them. But you have to stay diversified. I always say everyone's money is kind of like a pyramid. You need to have a emergency cash, just so you lose your job, whatever happens, you've got that for at least 6 months. Then the next layer, make sure you have some diversification. And our customer base, we were seeing it this past, week of volatility, they weren't just buying the names that are in our Robinhood Investor Index. They were also buying broad-based index funds.
This is really
using
cool.
it as a way to add to it. And then after that, yes, invest in your aspirational things, because I think if you always just ever stay fully diversified, you're never going to see you have to take risk to get return. That always comes with it.
That's the smartest thing I've heard on this show. It's Monday for the week. That'll be,
that's a good start.
This has been great. Steph Guild, thank you so much with Robinhood. Running strategy for them in a blog. What's the name? Do you have some fancy
Investors Guild, just like my last
name? Oh, I get it. Great. Medieval, positively medieval. And very good.
It's
Steph
the branding.
Guild
The branding.
with investor skills, branding. Which social is the biggest reach for Robinhood?
Well, we have just Robinhood app on social, and then I have Steph Guild NYC myself.
Okay. Are you working TikTok every day?
I don't go. I'm on Instagram and X, not
go.
TikTok.
Okay. I haven't made.
I heard you talking about it. I'm just learning how to do these reels.
Yeah, I'm sitting over here. Paul saved me today. I'm over here trying to figure out how to put out Instagram. Don't be a stranger. Steph Guild, thank you so much with Robinhood today. What'd you learn there, Lisa? Some valuable. I thought you were taking notes.
No, I did, because my son's always asking questions. But I'm just amazed at the interest they have at this age compared to when I was that age.
Okay, they're on the beach. Snoop, Dr. Dre. Come on. At least they could play the Beach Boys.
Okay.
Los Angeles, 2028. I'm sorry. The Beach Boys.